Millions dismiss terrifying mysteries until undeniable evidence confronts them. Impossible echoes, vanished travelers, cryptic artifacts, and chilling anomalies keep investigators awake. Every discovery destroys certainty, inviting deeper doubt. Ready to question reality before reality questions you back forever, starting now with the first unbelievable case awaiting your attention tonight alone. At first light, the hills of County Meath seem almost weightless beneath drifting mist. Soft green fields stretch toward the horizon, interrupted only by weathered stones that have watched countless seasons pass. Rising above the landscape is Loughcrew Cairns, a collection of ancient passage tombs resting along the highest ridge for miles. From this elevation, the countryside unfolds in every direction, as though the builders intentionally chose a place where earth and sky appear to meet. Even in silence, the site carries an unmistakable presence. Wind slips through the grass, ravens circle overhead, and the stones remain exactly where they have stood for thousands of years. Loughcrew is believed to date to around 3,200 BC, making it older than Stonehenge and comparable in age to the Great Passage tombs found elsewhere in Ireland. Archaeologists have identified more than 30 cairns scattered across these hills, though only a handful remain substantially intact today. Built from enormous stones transported without modern machinery, each monument reflects remarkable planning, engineering, and communal effort. The question is not simply how they were built, but why such extraordinary labor was devoted to this particular ridge. One of the best-known monuments, Cairn T, reveals its greatest secret only at specific moments of the year. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, the rising sun enters the narrow passage and illuminates the inner chamber with surprising precision. For a brief time, sunlight reaches carvings hidden in darkness for the remainder of the year. Spirals, circles, zigzags, and geometric patterns emerge from the shadows before fading once again. To many researchers, this alignment demonstrates an advanced understanding of seasonal cycles and astronomy. Ancient farming communities depended on the changing seasons, making careful observations of the sky essential for survival. A monument that marked these transitions could have served as both a ceremonial center and a practical calendar. Yet the remarkable accuracy of the alignment continues to inspire admiration. Without metal instruments or written mathematics, how did these builders achieve such precision? The carvings themselves deepen the mystery. Hundreds of engraved symbols cover many of the stones throughout the complex. Some resemble flowing spirals that seem almost to move when sunlight strikes them at different angles. Others form repeated patterns whose meanings have disappeared into prehistory. Were these decorations? Religious symbols? Maps of celestial movements? Or perhaps they represented stories remembered by generations who left no written record behind. Excavations have uncovered cremated human remains, pottery, bone pins, stone tools, and decorative objects, suggesting that the cairns served as important ceremonial and burial places. The evidence supports the idea that these monuments were deeply connected to death, remembrance, and community identity. Rather than isolated graves, they appear to have been sacred spaces revisited across centuries, where rituals reinforced connections between the living, the dead, and the surrounding landscape. Still, not every interpretation remains within conventional archaeology. Some independent researchers have proposed that Loughcrew formed part of a much larger ceremonial network extending across ancient Ireland. They point to visual alignments between prominent hills, monuments, and distant landmarks, suggesting intentional relationships that may have guided movement or ritual. Others wonder whether the builders possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge now only partially understood. Could the carvings encode observations of the heavens in symbolic form rather than written language? Local folklore adds another layer. Legends speak of powerful figures shaping the hills in forgotten ages, while stories describe supernatural events unfolding around the cairns after sunset. Such tales belong to Ireland's rich oral tradition, where history and mythology often intertwine. They cannot be treated as historical evidence, yet they reveal how generations perceived these ancient monuments, not merely as ruins, but as places where ordinary rules seemed less certain. Modern technology continues to uncover new details. High-resolution surveys, laser scanning, and digital mapping have revealed subtle features that were previously overlooked, including hidden carvings and traces of construction techniques invisible to the naked eye. Each discovery answers one question while raising several more. Even after decades of research, the site refuses to surrender all its secrets. Standing among the stones today, it becomes difficult not to imagine the countless people who climbed this ridge before sunrise, thousands of years ago. They watched the same horizon, felt the same wind, and waited for the first rays of light to enter chambers carefully designed long before recorded history. Their voices have vanished. Their beliefs remain uncertain, yet their achievements endure. Perhaps Loughcrew Cairns is simply an extraordinary monument built by remarkably skilled people. Or perhaps its deepest purpose still lies beyond our understanding, waiting patiently within stone, shadow, and the returning light of each equinox. If places like Loughcrew Cairns remind us that ancient monuments can preserve questions longer than they preserve answers, then our journey now carries us farther east, where another enduring mystery rises not from a windswept hill, but from the edge of a quiet spring. Here, water rather than sunlight becomes the defining presence, reflecting faces carved into stone thousands of years ago. Like many of the world's oldest sacred places, Eflatun Pınar seems to exist between history and symbolism, inviting every generation to look into its waters and ask the same unanswered questions. Surrounded by the broad plains of central Turkey, Eflatun Pınar appears almost unexpectedly. There are no towering walls or sprawling ruins visible from miles away. Instead, the monument emerges with remarkable restraint. Crystal-clear water flows continuously from beneath an elaborate stone facade, collecting into a tranquil pool before continuing its slow journey across the landscape. The sound is gentle and constant, as though the spring has been speaking for thousands of years without interruption. At first glance, the structure resembles an enormous stone shrine, carefully placed beside the natural source. Massive blocks of carefully shaped limestone rise several meters high, assembled with impressive precision. Dominating the monument are large carved human figures standing upright in solemn poses. Above and around them appear winged discs, mythical creatures, geometric forms, and symbols whose meanings remain only partially understood. Time has softened many details, yet the monument still possesses an unmistakable sense of deliberate design. Most archaeologists identify Eflatun Pınar as a sacred spring sanctuary constructed during the Late Bronze Age, likely during the 13th century BC under the Hittite Empire. The Hittites controlled much of Anatolia during this period, establishing powerful cities, sophisticated legal systems, and extensive diplomatic relationships with neighboring kingdoms. They left behind thousands of clay tablets recording treaties, religious ceremonies, royal correspondence, and administrative records. Yet, despite this wealth of written material, surprisingly little documentation explains monuments like Eflatun Pınar in detail. That absence has transformed the site into one of Anatolia's most quietly persistent mysteries. The Hittites regarded natural springs as places of profound spiritual significance. Water represented life, purification, renewal, and divine presence. Sacred pools often became locations where humans believed communication with powerful deities was possible. Rather than separating architecture from nature, Hittite builders frequently integrated both into a single ceremonial landscape. At Eflatun Pınar, the monument seems carefully designed so that carved stone and flowing water become inseparable elements of one experience. Researchers generally believe the central figures represent important Hittite gods or divine rulers associated with cosmic order and fertility. Some identify them as the storm god and the sun goddess, two of the most significant deities within Hittite religion. Around them appear additional divine beings, hybrid creatures, and symbolic motifs arranged in carefully balanced layers. The overall composition suggests more than artistic decoration. It appears to communicate an organized vision of the universe itself. Yet exactly how this symbolic language was intended to be read remains uncertain. Unlike later civilizations that left extensive explanatory texts accompanying monumental art, the creators of Eflatun Pınar offered few direct clues. Modern scholars compare the carvings with surviving Hittite inscriptions and nearby monuments, searching for recurring themes and iconography. Certain symbols can be interpreted with reasonable confidence. Others remain entirely enigmatic. Even the engineering continues to attract attention. The monument was constructed directly around an active freshwater spring, requiring builders to understand both structural stability and the constant movement of water. Despite thousands of years of earthquakes, seasonal flooding, and environmental change, much of the original arrangement survives remarkably well. The spring continues flowing today much as it likely did when the sanctuary was first completed. Was this simply careful engineering combined with favorable geology? Most specialists believe so. Ancient builders possessed practical knowledge gained through generations of observation and experience. Yet some researchers have noted how precisely the monument appears integrated with its natural setting. Every stone seems positioned to emphasize the emergence of water itself, transforming an ordinary spring into something far more ceremonial. The architecture does not dominate nature. Instead, it frames it. This relationship between monument and landscape has inspired broader interpretations. Some historians suggest that Eflatun Pınar functioned not only as a religious sanctuary, but also as a public declaration of political authority. Controlling sacred places often strengthened royal legitimacy. By associating rulers with divine order and life-giving water, monumental construction reinforced both spiritual and governmental power. Visitors approaching the spring would have encountered an unmistakable visual message linking cosmic stability with Hittite kingship. Others propose a more astronomical dimension. Although Eflatun Pınar lacks the famous solar alignments found at monuments like Loughcrew or Stonehenge, some independent researchers argue that aspects of its orientation may correspond to seasonal observations or celestial symbolism embedded within Hittite religion. The evidence remains debated. No scholarly consensus supports a precise astronomical function, yet the possibility continues to invite investigation because so many ancient ceremonial sites reveal unexpected relationships with the sky. The monument's extraordinary preservation has also raised questions about construction techniques. Individual stone blocks weigh several tons. Transporting, shaping, and assembling them without modern machinery demanded remarkable organization. Archaeologists generally conclude that coordinated labor forces using sledges, rollers, ropes, and earthen ramps could accomplish such work. Similar methods have been demonstrated at numerous ancient sites around the world. Still, standing before the finished monument, it is difficult not to appreciate the immense logistical achievement represented by every carefully placed block. Folklore adds another layer to the mystery. Over centuries, local traditions attached stories to the spring that gradually blended memory with imagination. Some believed the waters possessed unusual purity or healing qualities. Others regarded the carved figures as silent guardians watching over hidden knowledge buried beneath the earth. Such legends cannot be verified through archaeology, yet they reveal something equally important. People continued assigning meaning to the monument long after its original builders disappeared from history. Perhaps that continuity explains why Eflatun Pınar feels strangely timeless. Unlike abandoned cities filled with collapsed buildings, the sanctuary remains animated by moving water. Nothing about it appears entirely still. Reflections shimmer across carved faces, changing with every ripple. Morning light reveals details invisible by afternoon. Seasonal rains alter the surrounding vegetation, while the spring itself remains constant. It becomes difficult to separate the monument from the living landscape around it. Recent archaeological work has employed digital modeling, detailed conservation studies, and environmental analysis to better understand both the structure and its original surroundings. Researchers continue documenting weathering patterns, stone sources, construction methods, and hydrological conditions. Every new survey improves our understanding of the monument's physical history, yet its symbolic purpose remains remarkably elusive. What ceremonies unfolded beside these waters? What words were spoken as priests, rulers, or pilgrims gathered before the carved deities? Did participants believe the spring connected their world with another invisible realm? Or was it simply the most fitting place to express gratitude for the gift of fresh water upon which every community depended? Thousands of years later, the spring continues its patient flow, indifferent to changing empires, shifting languages, and modern interpretations. The carved figures remain fixed in their silent procession, offering no explanation to those who stand before them. Whether viewed as an extraordinary achievement of Hittite engineering, a masterpiece of sacred symbolism, or the surviving fragment of beliefs only partly remembered, Eflatun Pınar refuses to reveal every layer of its story. And perhaps that enduring silence is what makes the monument so compelling, leaving us to wonder whether its greatest secret has been preserved not within the stones themselves, but within the flowing water that has never stopped carrying the past forward. If the flowing waters of Eflatun Pınar remind us that civilizations often leave behind symbols whose meanings fade long before the monuments themselves, our journey now shifts farther east into southern India. Here, the mystery is not centered on towering stone sanctuaries or carefully carved deities, but on something equally compelling, a buried city that remained hidden beneath ordinary farmland until recent decades. Layer by layer, the earth has begun revealing a forgotten chapter of history, one that continues to reshape long-held assumptions while leaving many of its deepest questions unanswered. The landscape around Keeladi is quiet and unassuming. Situated near the Vaigai River in the modern state of Tamil Nadu, the area appears, at first glance, like countless other stretches of fertile countryside. Fields extend toward the horizon, trees sway gently in the warm air, and the rhythms of rural life continue much as they have for generations. There is little to suggest that beneath this peaceful ground lies evidence of an ancient settlement whose discoveries have sparked intense archaeological interest. Unlike monumental cities marked by towering ruins, Keeladi remained almost entirely concealed. No grand temples rose above the soil. No massive walls announced the presence of a lost civilization. Instead, centuries of natural deposition gradually covered homes, workshops, streets, and countless everyday objects, preserving them in remarkable silence. It was only through systematic archaeological excavation that this hidden world began to emerge. Beginning in the 21st century, archaeologists uncovered an extensive urban settlement containing brick structures, drainage systems, wells, pottery, industrial workshops, beads, iron tools, spindle whorls, gaming pieces, and thousands of other artifacts. The discoveries suggested a thriving community with organized planning, skilled craftsmanship, and sophisticated daily life. Radiocarbon dating has placed portions of the settlement as early as the 6th century BC, while ongoing research continues refining the chronology. These dates have attracted considerable attention because they contribute to broader discussions about the development of urbanization and literacy in southern India. To archaeologists, Keeladi offers something exceptionally valuable. Rather than documenting kings or monumental architecture, the site reveals ordinary life. Homes were constructed with carefully laid bricks. Water management systems demonstrate thoughtful planning. Evidence of textile production, metalworking, pottery manufacturing, and bead-making points toward specialized occupations. Every object contributes another small detail to the picture of a community whose residents worked, traded, learned, and adapted over many generations. Perhaps most intriguing are the inscriptions. Several pottery fragments bear markings written in Tamil Brahmi script, one of the earliest known writing systems associated with the Tamil language. Although brief, these inscriptions suggest literacy was present among at least part of the population. Personal names, ownership marks, or commercial labels may have been recorded on everyday objects. For historians, such discoveries provide important evidence for understanding the cultural development of ancient Tamil society. Yet they also raise larger questions. How extensive was this settlement? Current excavated areas represent only a fraction of the landscape believed to contain archaeological remains. Ground surveys indicate that significant portions of the ancient community remain buried beneath surrounding farmland. Each excavation season uncovers additional streets, structures, and artifacts, suggesting that researchers have only begun exploring the full extent of the site. The more that emerges, the more difficult it becomes to define the settlement's true scale. Trade appears to have played an important role in Keeladi's development. Beads fashioned from semi-precious stones, finely produced ceramics, and evidence of iron technology suggest connections extending beyond the immediate region. Ancient trade routes throughout southern India linked inland communities with coastal ports, allowing goods, ideas, and technologies to circulate across considerable distances. Some artifacts resemble materials discovered at other archaeological sites throughout the Indian subcontinent, indicating networks of interaction rather than isolated development. Most historians interpret these findings within well-established patterns of regional commerce and cultural exchange. Others ask whether the settlement's influence may have been even greater than currently recognized. Some independent researchers suggest Keeladi represents only one surviving part of a much larger network of early urban centers that flourished along the Vaigai River. According to this perspective, many related settlements may still remain hidden beneath villages, fields, and modern infrastructure. While archaeological evidence continues accumulating, the full distribution of these ancient communities has yet to be determined. Another area of discussion concerns chronology. As additional dating studies have become available, debates have emerged regarding the timing of urbanization in southern India. Mainstream archaeology approaches these questions cautiously, emphasizing that conclusions must remain grounded in carefully documented evidence. New discoveries may refine existing timelines, but extraordinary claims require equally substantial proof. Still, every excavation season introduces new material capable of reshaping previous interpretations. There are also questions that archaeology alone cannot fully answer. Who were the individuals whose fingerprints remain preserved on pottery fired more than 2,000 years ago? What languages echoed through these streets as merchants negotiated prices or families gathered around evening meals? Which songs accompanied festivals now entirely forgotten? Material remains reveal remarkable detail about technology and architecture, yet thoughts, beliefs, and personal experiences often disappear beyond recovery. The absence of monumental palaces has fascinated many researchers. Unlike some ancient cities where royal power dominates the archaeological record, Keeladi appears to emphasize domestic life and productive activity. Houses, workshops, drainage systems, and everyday objects occupy center stage. This has encouraged some scholars to view the settlement as evidence of a prosperous urban society whose organization depended upon skilled communities rather than exclusively monumental expressions of political authority. Even so, much remains uncertain. No definitive explanation fully accounts for why the settlement eventually declined or was abandoned. Environmental changes, Shifting river systems, economic transformations, political developments, or combinations of multiple factors may all have contributed. Ancient communities rarely disappear because of a single event. Instead, gradual changes often reshape landscapes over generations until once thriving cities quietly fade from memory. Folklore surrounding the region occasionally speaks of forgotten settlements concealed beneath the earth, though such traditions developed long after the ancient city itself disappeared. As with many archaeological sites, local stories preserve an enduring awareness that history often survives just beyond ordinary sight. While these accounts cannot substitute for scientific evidence, they illustrate humanity's enduring instinct to sense hidden worlds beneath familiar ground. Modern excavation methods continue expanding our understanding. Satellite imagery, geophysical surveys, microscopic residue analysis, botanical studies, and advanced dating techniques allow researchers to reconstruct increasingly detailed pictures of ancient life. Charred seeds reveal agricultural practices. Animal bones offer clues about diet. Soil chemistry identifies industrial activity. Even tiny fragments once overlooked now contribute valuable information. Yet despite these technological advances, Keeladi retains an unusual quality. Unlike monuments designed to impress visitors through overwhelming scale, its mystery emerges from ordinary existence. A clay bead, a broken pot, a brick wall, a drainage channel. Individually, each discovery appears modest. Together, they reveal an entire society that flourished, adapted, and vanished with surprisingly little mention in surviving historical records. Standing at the excavation site today, one sees open trenches descending into carefully exposed layers of earth. Archaeologists move patiently with brushes and small tools, knowing that even the smallest fragment may alter current understanding. Every layer removed represents another step backward through time, uncovering streets where children once played, artisans once worked, and conversations unfolded beneath skies identical to those above us today. Perhaps the greatest mystery surrounding Keeladi is not what has already been discovered, but what remains untouched beneath the surrounding landscape. If only a small portion of this ancient settlement has been revealed, how many more structures, inscriptions, workshops, or unexpected discoveries continue waiting beneath the soil? And if future excavations uncover entirely new chapters of its story, could they transform not only our understanding of one forgotten city, but of an entire civilization whose voice is only beginning to emerge from the earth? If Keeladi reminds us that entire cities can remain hidden beneath quiet fields for centuries, then our next destination reveals a different kind of mystery, one that was never truly buried at all. High above the surrounding valleys, where cold mountain winds sweep across an isolated plateau, the ruins of Marcahuamachuco have remained visible for more than 1,000 years. Yet despite standing in plain sight, much of their story continues to elude those who study them. Perched at an altitude of more than 3,200 meters in the northern Andes of Peru, Marcahuamachuco commands an extraordinary view of the landscape below. Sheer cliffs protect much of the plateau, creating a natural fortress that seems almost detached from the modern world. Long before a visitor reaches the ruins themselves, the site begins to make an impression. The air grows thinner. The silence becomes more noticeable. Clouds drift across the mountains, casting slow-moving shadows over weathered stone walls that have endured centuries of wind, rain, and shifting empires. Unlike many ancient settlements, Marcahuamachuco does not reveal its purpose immediately. Massive stone enclosures stretch across the plateau in carefully planned arrangements. Circular and rectangular structures stand beside long defensive walls, while narrow passages connect different sections of the complex. From above, the layout appears deliberate and highly organized, suggesting that every feature served a specific function. Yet many of those functions remain uncertain. Archaeologists generally believe the site flourished between approximately AD 400 and AD 800, long before the expansion of the Inca Empire into this region. During this period, Marcahuamachuco became one of the most important political and ceremonial centers in the Northern Highlands. It was associated with a culture that modern researchers often refer to as the Huamachuco tradition, although much about the people themselves remains only partially understood. Unlike civilizations that left extensive written records, the builders of Marcahuamachuco relied on traditions that were largely transmitted through speech, ritual, and material culture. As a result, the stones have become the primary witnesses to their history. One of the site's most striking features is its monumental architecture. Some walls extend for remarkable distances, constructed from carefully fitted stone blocks without the use of mortar. Large compounds enclose open spaces whose original purposes continue to inspire debate. Certain buildings resemble administrative centers. Others appear ceremonial. Still others may have served defensive or residential functions. The complexity suggests careful planning rather than gradual, unorganized expansion. Excavations have uncovered pottery, stone tools, metal objects, textiles, food remains, and evidence of long-distance trade. These discoveries indicate that Marcahuamachuco was far from isolated despite its dramatic location. Networks connected the settlement with neighboring regions, allowing valuable materials, ideas, and technologies to move across the Andes. Most archaeologists interpret the city as an important regional capital where political leadership, religious ceremonies, and commerce intersected. Yet questions quickly emerge. Why was such an enormous settlement constructed atop an exposed plateau where daily life demanded significant physical effort? The defensive advantages are obvious. Towering cliffs made invasion difficult, while elevated views allowed inhabitants to monitor approaching travelers. However, security alone may not explain the city's extraordinary scale. Some researchers argue that the location carried symbolic meaning as well. Throughout the Andes, mountains occupied profound spiritual significance. Peaks were often regarded as living entities connected with weather, fertility, water, and ancestral power. Building a ceremonial center upon a high plateau may have reinforced these beliefs, placing important rituals closer to both the heavens above and the sacred landscape surrounding them. Evidence of ritual activity has indeed been discovered throughout the site. Within several circular stone structures, archaeologists identified burials, ceremonial offerings, and carefully arranged deposits that appear inconsistent with ordinary domestic life. These findings support the interpretation that at least portions of Marcahuamachuco functioned as important religious spaces. Still, many details remain elusive. The largest circular compounds are especially intriguing. Known today as galleries, these enormous structures feature thick stone walls enclosing expansive interior spaces. Their architecture differs noticeably from ordinary residential buildings. Some scholars propose they served as elite ceremonial centers. Others believe they functioned as mausoleums honoring important individuals. Additional interpretations suggest storage facilities or locations for large communal gatherings. No single explanation has gained universal acceptance. The uncertainty has encouraged broader speculation. Independent researchers occasionally suggest that the galleries possessed astronomical significance. Certain alignments between walls, entrances, and surrounding mountains have inspired theories connecting the structures with observations of seasonal solar movements or important celestial events. While archaeology has not established definitive astronomical functions comparable to those documented at some ancient monuments elsewhere, the possibility remains an active subject of discussion because many Andean societies closely observed the rhythms of the sky. The surrounding landscape contributes its own layer of mystery. Towering rock formations rise beyond the plateau, while deep valleys disappear into shifting mist. During sunrise and sunset, changing light transforms the ruins dramatically. Walls that seem ordinary at midday suddenly cast long geometric shadows, emphasizing architectural relationships difficult to notice at other times. It becomes easier to understand why generations associated elevated places with spiritual reflection and ceremonial importance. Spanish chroniclers who encountered the region centuries after the city's decline recorded fragments of local traditions describing Marcahuamachuco as an ancient place already possessing great age. Even then, memories of its original builders had largely faded. Stories survived, but historical certainty had become increasingly difficult to separate from legend. Some accounts spoke of powerful rulers. Others described sacred gatherings. Still others hinted at hidden chambers or forgotten treasures concealed beneath collapsed structures. Archaeological investigations have uncovered no evidence supporting tales of legendary riches. Such stories appear throughout the world wherever impressive ruins inspire imagination. Nevertheless, legends often preserve something more subtle than literal truth. They remind us that remarkable places rarely disappear entirely from human memory. Instead, they become woven into new cultural narratives, carrying echoes of the past into later generations. Modern research has transformed our understanding of the site. Drone surveys now reveal architectural patterns impossible to appreciate from ground level. Three-dimensional mapping documents fragile walls with extraordinary precision. Soil analysis, botanical studies, and radiocarbon dating continue refining knowledge of agriculture, climate, and occupation. Every technological advance allows researchers to reconstruct another fragment of life upon the plateau. Yet despite these achievements, Marcahuamachuco still resists simple interpretation. Why did certain architectural forms appear here but nowhere else in exactly the same way? What ceremonies unfolded inside the great circular galleries? How was authority organized among the people who governed such an extensive settlement? And perhaps most intriguingly, why did this important center eventually decline? Several explanations have been proposed. Political transformation may have shifted regional power elsewhere. Economic changes could have disrupted established trade networks. Environmental pressures, prolonged drought, or social conflict may also have contributed. Later expansion by neighboring cultures likely altered the region's balance as well. Rather than a single dramatic collapse, the city's decline probably unfolded gradually over generations. Even abandonment failed to erase its presence. Today, the plateau remains remarkably quiet. Wind moves through empty corridors once filled with conversation. Birds nest among walls that once defined ceremonial spaces. The mountains continue surrounding the ruins exactly as they did centuries ago, indifferent to the passing of kingdoms. Standing within Marcahuamachuco, there is a persistent sense that the landscape itself remembers more than surviving evidence can reveal. The stones preserve outlines, but not voices. Pathways remain visible, yet the footsteps that wore them smooth have long disappeared. Archaeology continues uncovering valuable clues, but each answer seems to uncover another layer of uncertainty. Perhaps that is the enduring power of Marcahuamachuco. It does not overwhelm through sheer size alone, nor through spectacular legends. Instead, it quietly invites deeper reflection, asking whether an entire civilization can still hide its greatest secrets in plain sight. As excavation continues and new discoveries emerge from the Andean plateau, one question remains suspended in the mountain air. How much of Marcahuamachuco's true story is still waiting beneath the stones that have watched the centuries pass in silence? If the silent stone walls of Marcahuamachuco demonstrate how entire civilizations can fade while leaving only fragments of their story behind, our next destination takes us to one of history's greatest archaeological puzzles. Here, the mystery is not hidden atop a mountain or concealed beneath dense forests, but spread across a vast plain where an advanced civilization flourished for centuries before quietly disappearing. Its cities were meticulously planned, its people highly skilled, and yet one of its greatest secrets remains beyond our reach: their own written words. On the fertile plains of present-day Punjab, Pakistan, the ancient city of Harappa rises gently from the landscape as a series of weathered mounds. From a distance, the site appears almost ordinary. Low earthen ridges blend into the surrounding countryside, offering little indication that beneath them lie the remains of one of the world's earliest great urban civilizations. Wind carries dust across exposed bricks that have endured for more than 4,000 years, while scattered fragments of pottery still emerge from the soil after seasonal rains. Unlike monuments built to dominate the horizon, Harappa reveals itself gradually. Excavation trenches expose carefully laid brick walls, narrow streets, drainage channels, wells, courtyards, workshops, and granaries. Every layer uncovers evidence of deliberate planning. Nothing appears random. Houses were constructed according to consistent proportions. Roads followed organized layouts. Water was managed through remarkably sophisticated drainage systems that rivaled those of many societies thousands of years later. The city belonged to what archaeologists call the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization, which flourished from approximately 2600 BC to 1900 BC. At its height, this civilization extended across an enormous region encompassing parts of present-day Pakistan and northwestern India, covering hundreds of thousands of square kilometers. Harappa was one of its principal urban centers, alongside cities such as Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, and Rakhigarhi. What makes Harappa extraordinary is not only its age, but its remarkable level of organization. Standardized fired bricks appear throughout the settlement, suggesting shared construction practices across distant cities. Carefully calibrated weights indicate regulated systems of trade and commerce. Craftsmen produced exquisite beads, pottery, metal tools, shell ornaments, and finely carved seals that display extraordinary attention to detail. Trade networks extended far beyond the civilization itself. Archaeological discoveries indicate commercial connections with regions stretching toward Mesopotamia, Central Asia, and the Persian Gulf. Copper, precious stones, timber, and other valuable materials moved through these networks, linking Harappa to cultures hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. For a civilization so technologically capable, one absence is especially striking. No unmistakable royal palaces have been identified. No massive temples dominate the skyline. No monumental statues celebrate powerful kings. Unlike ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, where rulers filled monuments with inscriptions proclaiming their achievements, Harappa presents a different picture. Authority certainly existed, but exactly how society was governed remains uncertain. Even more remarkable is the civilization's writing. Thousands of seals, pottery fragments, tablets, and small objects bear short inscriptions composed of distinctive symbols. More than 400 unique signs have been identified, carefully engraved into stone and other materials. Animals frequently accompany these inscriptions, including bulls, elephants, rhinoceroses, tigers, buffalo, and the famous unicorn-like figure that appears repeatedly throughout Harappan art. Yet, despite decades of study, no one has conclusively deciphered the script. This single mystery has transformed Harappa into one of archaeology's greatest enigmas. Researchers have compared the symbols with numerous ancient writing systems. Sophisticated computer analysis has examined recurring patterns and statistical structures. Linguists continue searching for relationships with known language families. Some scholars believe the inscriptions represent a complete writing system. Others argue they may consist of administrative symbols or specialized religious notation rather than full written language. Without a bilingual inscription comparable to the Rosetta Stone, certainty remains elusive. Imagine discovering an entire civilization whose books could not be read. Its merchants, artisans, priests, and leaders may have recorded names, beliefs, transactions, or histories. Those messages still exist, preserved on seals buried beneath the earth for thousands of years, yet their meaning remains locked behind symbols no living person fully understands. The city's engineering raises equally fascinating questions. Harappa possessed one of the ancient world's most advanced sanitation systems. Brick-lined drains ran beneath streets. Many homes included bathing areas connected to wastewater channels. Wells supplied clean water throughout residential neighborhoods. Such infrastructure suggests careful civic planning. Was there a centralized governing authority coordinating construction across multiple cities? Or did shared cultural traditions encourage remarkable consistency without requiring powerful monarchs? Archaeologists continue debating these possibilities. Religion presents another area of uncertainty. Various figurines, seals, and ceremonial objects suggest complex spiritual beliefs, but their precise meaning remains difficult to interpret. Some images depict seated human figures surrounded by animals. Others feature sacred trees, mythical creatures, or ritual scenes. Certain scholars have proposed connections with later religious traditions of South Asia, while others urge caution, emphasizing the considerable chronological distance separating these cultures. Material evidence alone rarely explains belief with complete confidence. Then there is the question that has captivated researchers for generations. What happened to Harappa? By around 1900 BC, many major cities of the Indus Valley civilization entered periods of decline. Urban populations decreased. Long-distance trade diminished. Large public construction projects became less common. For many years, dramatic invasion theories dominated popular imagination. Modern archaeology, however, paints a far more complex picture. Evidence increasingly suggests that environmental changes may have played a significant role. Shifting river systems likely altered water availability. Climate fluctuations may have affected agriculture. Economic transformations could have disrupted established trade networks. Population movements gradually reshaped settlement patterns over several centuries, rather than through sudden catastrophe. Still, numerous details remain unresolved. Why did such an advanced urban civilization fragment without leaving clearer historical records? Why did its writing disappear completely? And why do later societies preserve so little direct memory of cities that once supported tens of thousands of people? These unanswered questions have naturally inspired more speculative interpretations. Some independent researchers suggest undiscovered archives may still lie beneath unexcavated sections of Harappa or neighboring cities, waiting to reveal longer inscriptions capable of unlocking the script. Others wonder whether future discoveries will fundamentally alter current understanding of the civilization's political organization or cultural influence. More unconventional theories occasionally propose forgotten scientific knowledge, advanced surveying techniques, or symbolic systems encoding astronomical observations. While no convincing archaeological evidence currently supports such claims, they reflect the extraordinary fascination generated by a civilization that appears both sophisticated and unexpectedly mysterious. Excavation itself remains incomplete. Only portions of Harappa have been explored in detail. Large areas remain buried beneath layers of earth or protected from excavation for future generations equipped with more advanced technologies. Every archaeological season produces new discoveries, additional seals, tools, ornaments, human remains, and architectural features that gradually refine our understanding while simultaneously raising fresh questions. Standing among the exposed brick streets today, it is difficult not to imagine the countless lives that once unfolded here. Children may have played beside wells now filled with dust. Merchants likely crossed these same pathways carrying goods from distant lands. Craftsmen shaped beads whose colors still survive after 4 millennia. Somewhere within these neighborhoods, scribes carefully engraved symbols that continue defying every attempt at translation. Harappa offers an unusual kind of mystery. It is not defined by legends of vanished treasure or stories of supernatural events. Instead, its mystery is quieter, perhaps even more profound. An entire civilization reached remarkable heights of urban planning, engineering, craftsmanship, and commerce, yet its own voice remains silent. Until the script is finally understood, or unless some entirely unexpected discovery emerges from beneath the ancient soil, we remain observers standing just outside the conversation, wondering what the people of Harappa were trying to tell the future, and whether their greatest secret is still waiting to be uncovered. If Harappa leaves us searching for the meaning of symbols no one can fully read, our next destination presents a different kind of puzzle. Here, the carvings are unmistakably visible, their figures preserved in remarkable detail across living rock. We can see the faces, the clothing, the procession of gods, and even the gestures they make. Yet despite this extraordinary clarity, their deepest purpose remains a matter of continuing debate. Sometimes history speaks plainly through stone, while still withholding its most important answers. Hidden among the rocky hills near the ancient Hittite capital of Hattusa in central Turkey lies Yazılıkaya, a sanctuary unlike almost any other from the ancient world. Rather than constructing a temple enclosed by towering walls, its creators transformed a natural outcrop of limestone into a sacred space. Narrow passages lead visitors between towering rock faces until they enter open-air chambers where hundreds of carved figures emerge directly from the stone itself. The silence inside these chambers feels different. The surrounding cliffs soften the sounds of the outside world. Sunlight moves slowly across the carved surfaces, changing the appearance of each figure as the hours pass. Shadows deepen the folds of ancient garments and sharpen the outlines of elaborate headdresses. Even after more than 3,000 years, the reliefs possess an astonishing sense of movement, as though an endless ceremonial procession has been frozen in time. Yazılıkaya was created during the final centuries of the Hittite Empire, most likely in the 13th century BC during the reign of King Tudhaliya IV. By this time, the Hittites had established one of the most influential powers of the Late Bronze Age, controlling large areas of Anatolia and maintaining diplomatic relationships with neighboring kingdoms through warfare, treaties, and royal marriages. The sanctuary occupies a special place within this world. Unlike ordinary temples that housed cult statues inside enclosed buildings, Yazılıkaya embraces the natural landscape. Massive limestone walls become both architecture and artwork. Instead of hiding sacred imagery behind doors, the mountain itself serves as the sanctuary. The carvings are extraordinary in both number and detail. More than 90 figures appear throughout the two principal chambers, representing gods, goddesses, mythical beings, royal individuals, and symbolic creatures. Many march in carefully ordered processions toward central meeting points, creating the impression of an eternal gathering among divine powers. The largest figures dominate the compositions. The storm god, one of the supreme deities of the Hittite pantheon, stands confidently upon mountain gods, facing the powerful sun goddess. Their meeting occupies the visual center of the sanctuary, surrounded by numerous lesser deities whose identities are known through comparisons with surviving Hittite texts. For archaeologists and historians, the general religious purpose of Yazılıkaya is reasonably well established. It functioned as an important ceremonial sanctuary connected with state religion, royal authority, and seasonal rituals. Written tablets recovered from nearby Hattusa describe complex religious festivals involving hundreds of deities, elaborate processions, offerings, music, and carefully prescribed ceremonies. Yet these texts never provide a complete explanation for every detail preserved within the sanctuary itself. One question concerns the remarkable organization of the carvings. The figures are not arranged randomly. Each occupies a carefully considered position within the composition. Similar clothing identifies related groups. Distinctive symbols distinguish major gods from minor attendants. Even the direction in which each figure walks appears deliberate. Was this simply artistic order? Or did the arrangement communicate something more complex? Many scholars believe the sanctuary represents a visual map of the Hittite cosmos, illustrating relationships among divine powers responsible for maintaining order throughout the universe. According to this interpretation, visitors entering the chambers participated symbolically in a sacred journey through the structure of creation itself. Another intriguing possibility has gained attention in recent decades. Some researchers propose that Yazılıkaya may also have functioned as a sophisticated calendrical monument. According to this hypothesis, the number and arrangement of certain figures correspond with lunar months, solar cycles, or recurring astronomical events. Supporters point to repeated numerical patterns and carefully organized processions that could reflect the passage of time rather than simple artistic decoration. The idea remains debated. Many specialists acknowledge that ancient civilizations closely observed celestial movements and frequently incorporated astronomical symbolism into religious architecture. However, whether Yazılıkaya served as an actual calendar or merely expressed broader cosmic themes remains uncertain. Existing evidence allows multiple interpretations, and no single explanation has achieved universal acceptance. The sanctuary's relationship with the surrounding landscape deepens the mystery. Unlike enclosed temples isolated from nature, Yazılıkaya changes continuously with light, weather, and season. Morning sunlight illuminates different carvings than afternoon light. Rain darkens the limestone, making certain reliefs appear more vivid. During winter, frost settles within the narrow chambers, while summer heat transforms the stone into warm shades of gold. Perhaps these changing conditions formed part of the original experience. Visitors may have encountered different visual effects depending upon the season in which ceremonies occurred. If so, the sanctuary was never intended to remain visually constant. Instead, it participated in the natural rhythms surrounding it. Nearby archaeological discoveries reinforce the site's ceremonial importance. Excavations have identified pathways, structural remains, offering areas, and connections linking Yazılıkaya with the nearby royal capital. Processions likely moved between these locations during major festivals, integrating political authority with sacred ritual. Still, many aspects remain unknown. Certain figures cannot be identified with complete confidence. Some symbols appear nowhere else. The smaller Chamber B presents an especially intriguing atmosphere. Narrower and more secluded than the principal chamber, it contains reliefs associated with underworld deities and ancestral figures. The mood changes noticeably upon entering. Towering carvings of sword gods emerge from the stone, while winged beings and mysterious divine attendants stand silently nearby. Many researchers believe Chamber B held particular significance for royal funerary rituals or ancestor worship. Others suggest it represented symbolic access to the underworld described within Hittite religious belief. Neither interpretation fully explains every detail. As with so many ancient sanctuaries, certainty remains just beyond reach. Local traditions developed around the site long after the Hittite Empire disappeared. Generations who no longer remembered the sanctuary's original purpose nevertheless recognized that these carved chambers possessed unusual significance. Stories gradually emerged describing ancient giants, forgotten kings, or supernatural gatherings hidden among the rocks. Such legends belong to folklore rather than archaeology, yet they demonstrate how impressive places continue inspiring imagination even after their historical context fades away. Modern technology has opened new avenues of investigation. Three-dimensional laser scanning documents every chisel mark with extraordinary precision. Digital imaging reveals weathered details previously overlooked. Geological studies examine how erosion has altered the chambers over millennia. Archaeologists continue comparing the reliefs with newly translated Hittite texts in hopes of identifying additional figures and ceremonies. Every discovery improves understanding. Yet every improvement also reveals new layers of complexity. Why were certain gods placed exactly where they stand? Why were particular numerical groupings repeated? Did ancient priests read these carvings as narratives, ritual instructions, cosmic diagrams, or something altogether different? Perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether the sanctuary possessed astronomical symbolism, ceremonial significance, or political meaning. It may have embodied all of these simultaneously, expressing ideas that ancient visitors understood instinctively, but modern observers struggle to reconstruct from surviving fragments. Standing within Yazılıkaya today, surrounded by silent processions carved into living rock, it becomes difficult to escape the feeling that the sanctuary was designed to communicate across generations. The figures continue their eternal march, unchanged by the rise and fall of empires, speaking in a symbolic language that remains only partly understood. We recognize the gods. We identify the kings. We can trace the outlines left by skilled Hittite artisans more than 3,000 years ago. Yet somewhere within the arrangement of those silent carvings, another layer of meaning may still remain concealed, waiting for the question, the discovery, or the insight that finally allows the mountain to reveal what it has been preserving all along. If Yazılıkaya reminds us that entire belief systems can be carved into stone, yet remain only partly understood, our journey now crosses the Andes once again to another remarkable sanctuary, one that appears less like a constructed monument and more like a mountain transformed by human hands. Here, the mystery is not written on walls or hidden beneath the earth, but sculpted directly into a single enormous slab of living rock. Weather has softened its details, civilizations have come and gone, yet its original purpose continues to invite careful debate. High in the foothills of eastern Bolivia, where the Andes gradually descend toward the forests of the Amazon basin, El Fuerte de Samaipata occupies a landscape unlike almost any other archaeological site in South America. Rolling green hills stretch into the distance, broken by steep ridges and drifting clouds that often arrive without warning. At the center of this landscape rises an immense sandstone outcrop, its surface covered with channels, stairways, terraces, geometric carvings, niches, basins, and mysterious figures that seem to flow naturally across the stone itself. From above, the monument resembles neither a city nor a fortress in the conventional sense. Instead, it appears as though generations of artisans patiently reshaped an entire hillside into a ceremonial landscape. Some carvings are broad and unmistakable. Others have been worn almost smooth by centuries of rain, wind, and erosion. Every change in sunlight reveals new lines, new shadows, and subtle details that can disappear just as quickly as they emerge. The name El Fuerte, meaning the fortress, was given during the colonial period, but modern archaeology suggests that the title is somewhat misleading. Although defensive structures existed in the surrounding area, the great carved rock itself was almost certainly far more than a military installation. Its true purpose remains one of the site's enduring mysteries. Archaeological evidence indicates that Samaipata was occupied by several different cultures across many centuries. Early activity may have begun long before the arrival of the Inca Empire, with the Chain people believed to have played an important role in shaping the site. Later, during the 15th century, the Inca expanded into the region, incorporating Samaipata into their growing imperial network. Following them came Spanish colonial settlements, adding yet another chapter to an already complex history. This succession of cultures makes interpretation especially challenging. Each community may have modified existing structures, reused sacred spaces, or assigned new meanings to older carvings. Distinguishing one period from another is often difficult, leaving archaeologists to reconstruct a layered history from incomplete evidence. The sandstone itself presents another remarkable feature. Stretching for more than 200 meters, it is considered one of the largest sculpted rock formations in the world. Rather than building temples upon the stone, ancient artisans carved directly into it. Long parallel grooves descend the surface. Circular depressions interrupt carefully shaped platforms. Staircases lead toward elevated sections that overlook the surrounding valleys. Animal figures emerge from the rock, their outlines still recognizable despite centuries of erosion. Among the most famous carvings are two elongated feline forms, often interpreted as pumas or jaguars. Throughout the Andes and neighboring lowlands, powerful cats frequently symbolized strength, protection, spiritual authority, and connections between the earthly and supernatural worlds. Their presence at Samaipata suggests that the site carried ceremonial importance extending beyond ordinary daily life. Most archaeologists agree that religion played a central role here. The carved channels may have guided flowing water during rituals. Elevated platforms could have served as stages for ceremonial gatherings. Nearby buildings indicate administrative, residential, and ceremonial functions existing alongside one another. Yet many individual features remain difficult to explain. Some channels appear practical, others seem entirely symbolic. Certain stairways lead nowhere obvious. Several carved basins have no universally accepted interpretation. Were they used for offerings? Did they collect rainwater for sacred ceremonies? Or did they serve purposes now impossible to reconstruct? Water itself may hold one of the site's most significant clues. Many ancient civilizations regarded flowing water as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. At Samaipata, carefully carved channels suggest that controlling the movement of water formed an important part of the monument's design. During seasonal rains, streams of water would have traveled across selected pathways carved into the sandstone, transforming the monument into a dynamic landscape rather than a static sculpture. Perhaps rituals unfolded not only around the rock, but through the movement of water across its surface. Some researchers have proposed that these carefully engineered flows carried symbolic meaning related to fertility, agriculture, purification, or communication with divine forces. The surrounding mountains add another dimension. From the summit, broad views extend across valleys that connect the high Andes with tropical lowlands far below. This strategic location offered advantages for trade, diplomacy, and defense. Caravans moving between ecological zones likely passed through the region, bringing goods, ideas, languages, and religious traditions from distant communities. As a result, Samaipata may have functioned as more than a local ceremonial center. It could have served as a meeting place where cultures from different environments interacted, exchanged knowledge, and reshaped one another over generations. Astronomy has also entered discussions surrounding the monument. Several investigators have suggested that portions of the carved rock align with significant solar events, seasonal observations, or prominent points along the horizon. Ancient Andean societies paid close attention to celestial cycles because agricultural success depended upon accurately predicting seasonal change. However, evidence for precise astronomical functions at Samaipata remains debated. Some alignments may reflect intentional design. Others could simply result from the natural shape of the rock combined with practical construction choices. The available evidence allows intriguing possibilities without producing definitive conclusions. Like many enigmatic monuments, Samaipata has attracted more speculative interpretations as well. Some independent researchers view the immense carved surface as an encoded map representing sacred geography, water systems, or celestial patterns. Others have imagined forgotten engineering knowledge or ceremonial practices no longer preserved in surviving traditions. More unconventional theories occasionally suggest that the monument's scale and unusual appearance point toward purposes beyond current archaeological understanding. To date, no convincing evidence supports such extraordinary claims. Yet their persistence reflects the powerful impression created by a monument unlike almost anything else in the ancient world. Local traditions contribute another layer to the story. For generations, the Great Rock has inspired legends describing powerful spirits, sacred guardians, and mysterious events connected with the mountain. Such accounts belong to folklore rather than documented history, but they reveal something consistent across cultures and centuries. People have repeatedly recognized that this place feels different. Modern archaeology continues revealing new information. High-resolution digital mapping records every surviving carving before erosion removes additional detail. Geological studies examine how weathering has altered the sandstone over time. Excavations surrounding the rock uncover ceramics, tools, architectural remains, and evidence of changing occupation across successive civilizations. Every discovery strengthens our understanding of the site's chronology. Yet the monument itself continues resisting complete explanation. Why was so much effort invested in reshaping a single natural outcrop instead of constructing conventional temples? Why do some carvings follow recognizable symbolic traditions, while others appear entirely unique? How many details have already disappeared beneath centuries of wind and rain, leaving only fragments of a once far more elaborate design? Standing upon the great sandstone today, surrounded by distant mountains and shifting clouds, it becomes difficult to separate nature from human intention. The monument seems almost alive as changing light moves across its carved surface. Lines emerge, fade, and reappear. Water gathers briefly after rainfall before continuing its quiet descent through channels shaped by hands long forgotten. Perhaps that is what makes El Fuerte de Samaipata so enduringly mysterious. It refuses to fit comfortably into a single category. It is part sanctuary, part sculpture, part ceremonial landscape, and part historical puzzle shaped by multiple civilizations across many centuries. Every groove carved into the stone represents a deliberate choice, yet many of those choices remain beyond modern understanding. And somewhere beneath the weathered surface of this remarkable mountain, there may still lie a pattern, a purpose, or a forgotten story waiting for someone to see the rock not simply as it appears today, but as its creators once intended it to be seen. If El Fuerte de Samaipata shows how a single carved landscape can preserve generations of unanswered questions, our journey now returns to the heart of ancient Anatolia, where another remarkable site has inspired historians, archaeologists, and storytellers for centuries. Here, mystery is woven not only into weathered stone and buried ruins, but into one of the most enduring legends ever recorded, the tale of a knot so intricate that it promised dominion over an empire. Yet beyond that famous story lies a real city, whose secrets may be even more fascinating than the legend itself. Across the broad plains of central Turkey, where golden fields ripple beneath an endless sky, the ancient city of Gordion rests quietly beside the Sakarya River. At first glance, the landscape seems peaceful, almost ordinary. Gentle hills rise from the surrounding countryside, while scattered earthen mounds interrupt the horizon like silent waves frozen in time. These mounds, known as tumuli, conceal elaborate burial chambers beneath layers of earth and stone. Together, they transform the landscape into a vast cemetery whose occupants ruled, governed, and disappeared nearly 3,000 years ago. Unlike towering pyramids or dramatic cliffside temples, Gordion reveals its grandeur slowly. The city's remains emerge through careful observation rather than overwhelming scale. Excavated foundations trace the outlines of massive buildings. Stone gateways hint at defensive walls that once protected thriving neighborhoods. Ancient roads, courtyards, workshops, and storage complexes reveal a community whose influence reached far beyond the surrounding plains. For centuries, this was the capital of the Phrygian kingdom, one of the most powerful states in Anatolia during the early 1st millennium BC. Its name is forever linked with King Midas. Mention Midas, and most people immediately recall the famous legend of the ruler whose touch transformed everything into gold. Yet behind the mythology stood a real historical kingdom, and very likely a real king. Assyrian records mention a powerful Phrygian ruler known as Mita, whom many historians identify with the figure remembered in later Greek traditions as Midas. The historical king was almost certainly more complex than the legend. Rather than chasing magical gifts, he governed a prosperous kingdom positioned along important trade routes connecting eastern and western Anatolia. Wealth flowed through Gordion in the form of timber, textiles, metalwork, agricultural goods, and skilled craftsmanship. Excavations have uncovered finely carved wooden furniture, intricate bronze objects, imported ceramics, woven textiles, and evidence of remarkable artistic achievement. Yet despite these discoveries, Gordion continues to guard many of its deepest secrets. Perhaps no mystery associated with the city is more famous than the Gordion knot. According to ancient tradition, an elaborate knot secured the yoke of an ox cart preserved within a sacred precinct. An oracle declared that whoever untied the impossible knot would rule all of Asia. Centuries later, Alexander the Great arrived at Gordion during his campaign across Anatolia. Faced with the legendary challenge, accounts differ regarding what happened next. Some writers claimed he patiently examined the knot before discovering its hidden fastening. Others described him drawing his sword and slicing directly through it. Whether either version reflects historical reality remains uncertain. The original knot has never been found. Some scholars suggest the story developed gradually as symbolic literature rather than eyewitness history. Others believe it may preserve a memory of genuine ritual practices once associated with royal authority in ancient Phrygia. The legend itself raises intriguing questions. Why did such a story become attached specifically to Gordion? Did an actual ceremonial object once exist? Or did later generations transform political traditions into one of antiquity's greatest symbolic narratives? Beyond the legend, archaeology reveals a city every bit as remarkable. Excavations have uncovered impressive fortification systems surrounding the settlement. Massive stone foundations supported mud brick walls that defended important administrative and residential districts. Within these walls stood carefully planned buildings featuring courtyards, storage facilities, and large reception halls. Evidence suggests repeated rebuilding across several centuries. Fire destroyed portions of the city on more than one occasion. Earthquakes likely contributed additional damage. Yet each generation reconstructed the settlement, adapting older structures while preserving the city's importance. One of Gordion's most extraordinary discoveries lies not within the city itself, but beneath one of the enormous burial mounds dominating the surrounding landscape. Known today as Tumulus MM, this immense mound concealed a remarkably preserved wooden burial chamber, constructed around the 8th century BC. Inside, archaeologists uncovered one of the richest funerary assemblages ever discovered from Iron Age Anatolia. The chamber contained elaborate wooden furniture, bronze vessels, finely crafted serving equipment, woven textiles, and the remains of a large funerary banquet. Dendrochronological analysis of the timber has provided unusually precise dating, allowing researchers to reconstruct aspects of the monument's construction with remarkable accuracy. Although the individual buried within the chamber was once believed to be King Midas himself, scientific dating now suggests the burial predates his reign. Many scholars instead believe the tomb belonged to Midas's father or another prominent member of the Phrygian royal family. Even this uncertainty contributes to the site's enduring fascination. The burial chamber raises countless questions. Why was such extraordinary care devoted to preserving wooden furnishings that would never again be seen? What ceremonies accompanied the funeral? What beliefs guided the placement of every object surrounding the deceased? The remarkable preservation of organic materials has provided archaeologists with invaluable insight into daily life, craftsmanship, and royal ritual. Yet material objects cannot fully explain symbolic meaning. Another mystery concerns the destruction of Gordion itself. Archaeological evidence reveals major episodes of burning affecting significant portions of the city. For many years, researchers attributed one devastating destruction layer to the Cimmerians, nomadic groups known to have invaded Anatolia during the early 7th century BC. Recent research, however, has encouraged more cautious interpretation. Some evidence suggests dating uncertainties remain. Other possibilities include accidental fires, internal conflict, or multiple destructive events occurring over different periods. As so often happens in archaeology, each new scientific method refines previous interpretations while introducing additional complexity. Religion at Gordion presents another fascinating puzzle. Although inscriptions and artifacts provide glimpses into Phrygian belief, much remains unknown. The mother goddess occupied an important position within regional religion, often associated with mountains, fertility, and nature. Later Greek writers connected her with Cybele, whose worship spread widely throughout the ancient Mediterranean. Yet exactly how religious ceremonies unfolded within Gordion itself remains difficult to reconstruct. Temples leave architecture. Offerings leave objects. Belief itself often disappears. The city's strategic location also invites broader questions. Positioned between Eastern and Western cultural spheres, Gordion absorbed influences from numerous neighboring societies while maintaining its own distinct identity. Imported goods reveal extensive trade. Artistic styles combine local traditions with foreign inspiration. Technologies spread through exchange rather than isolation. Was Gordion simply adapting to changing political realities? Or did it function as a major crossroads where ideas themselves became valuable commodities? Some independent researchers have suggested that undiscovered archives may still lie buried beneath unexplored portions of the city. If administrative buildings once housed written records on perishable materials such as wood, wax, leather, or papyrus, almost none would survive after thousands of years. Without extensive written documents, archaeology must reconstruct history from architecture, artifacts, environmental evidence, and scattered references preserved by neighboring civilizations. The result is impressive, yet inevitably incomplete. Like many ancient capitals, Gordion has also attracted more speculative interpretations. The enduring popularity of the Gordian knot has encouraged symbolic readings extending far beyond historical evidence. Some propose that the knot represented esoteric knowledge transmitted through priestly traditions. Others suggest hidden astronomical symbolism connected with royal ceremonies or sacred geometry embedded within the city's layout. At present, archaeology offers no convincing evidence supporting such conclusions. Still, the remarkable persistence of these theories reflects the unusual power of Gordion's historical legacy. Modern technology continues transforming our understanding of the site. If Gordion reminds us that legends can grow around real places until history and myth become almost impossible to separate, our next destination takes us even farther back in time, long before kingdoms, written language, or famous rulers. Here, there are no royal tombs, monumental temples, or epic tales preserved by ancient historians. Instead, the mystery lies in the quiet remains of one of humanity's earliest permanent communities, where ordinary lives unfolded at the very beginning of settled civilization. The farther we travel into the past, the fewer voices remain to explain what happened, leaving the earth itself as our only witness. In the volcanic landscape of central Turkey, where broad plains stretch beneath distant mountains and the Melendez River winds quietly through fertile ground, the Aşıklı Settlement appears at first as little more than a low earthen mound. Grass grows across its surface, softening the outlines of what once formed a thriving Neolithic community. Nothing about the landscape immediately suggests that beneath these layers of soil rests a settlement dating back more than 10,000 years, a place where some of the earliest experiments in permanent human life quietly unfolded. The silence here feels ancient. Unlike monumental archaeological sites marked by towering walls or imposing stone structures, Aşıklı invites patience rather than spectacle. Excavation trenches reveal carefully exposed mud brick walls, compact living spaces, hearths, storage pits, and narrow passages connecting one dwelling to another. Every layer uncovered by archaeologists represents generations of people who built, rebuilt, repaired, and reshaped their homes upon the same ground, gradually creating the mound that survives today. Radiocarbon dating places the earliest occupation at approximately 8,400 BC, making Aşıklı one of the oldest known permanent settlements in Anatolia. This was a remarkable period in human history. For countless generations before, most communities had lived as highly mobile hunter-gatherers, following seasonal resources across changing landscapes. At Aşıklı, however, something different was beginning to emerge. People stayed. They returned to the same place year after year until temporary shelters became permanent homes. Archaeologists view the settlement as one of the earliest examples of the profound transformation now known as the Neolithic Revolution. Yet, despite decades of excavation, many of its most important questions remain unanswered. The houses themselves offer the first clues. Constructed primarily from mud brick, the buildings were tightly packed together, often sharing walls with neighboring structures. Entrances were commonly located through the roofs rather than at ground level, requiring ladders to move between homes and open spaces. Inside, raised platforms served multiple purposes, functioning as places to sleep, work, gather, and perhaps even conduct rituals. This architectural arrangement appears remarkably organized. Rather than isolated family dwellings scattered across the landscape, Aşıklı displays evidence of careful planning and long-term occupation. Homes were repeatedly rebuilt upon the same foundations, preserving the overall structure of the settlement across centuries. Why did these early communities choose this particular place? Part of the answer likely lies in geography. The nearby Melendez River provided reliable water throughout much of the year. Volcanic landscapes supplied valuable obsidian, a naturally occurring volcanic glass prized for its razor-sharp edges. Obsidian could be fashioned into knives, spear points, scrapers, and other essential tools with remarkable precision. Its importance cannot be overstated. Long before the development of metalworking, obsidian represented one of the finest materials available for cutting implements. Chemical analysis has shown that obsidian from central Anatolia traveled across extensive trade networks, reaching communities hundreds of kilometers away. This suggests that Aşıklı was never entirely isolated. Even during this early stage of human history, ideas, materials, and technologies were already moving across considerable distances. Excavations reveal further evidence of innovation. Animal bones indicate that sheep and goats were gradually transitioning from hunted wild animals toward managed herds. Botanical remains suggest increasing reliance upon cultivated plants alongside continued gathering of wild resources. Rather than a sudden shift from hunting to farming, Aşıklı appears to document a long and complex period of experimentation. The people living here were not abandoning old ways overnight. Instead, they were adapting, testing, learning. Generation by generation, entirely new forms of society were beginning to take shape. Perhaps the most intriguing discoveries come not from tools or buildings, but from the people themselves. Archaeologists have uncovered numerous human burials beneath house floors. Individuals were often interred within the very buildings where they had lived, placing ancestors literally beneath the daily activities of surviving family members. This practice raises profound questions. Why bury the dead inside the home rather than in separate cemeteries? Did ancestors continue participating symbolically in family life? Were houses themselves understood as living spaces connecting past and present? Many Neolithic settlements across Anatolia share similar burial traditions, suggesting deeply rooted beliefs whose precise meanings have long since disappeared. Some skeletons display evidence of remarkable medical care. Healed fractures reveal that injured individuals survived serious accidents with the assistance of others. One particularly notable discovery documents what many researchers interpret as one of the earliest known examples of successful brain surgery, or trepanation. The individual survived the procedure long enough for substantial healing to occur. Such findings challenge assumptions about prehistoric medicine. Without written knowledge, metal instruments, or modern anatomy, these communities nevertheless developed practical methods of treating severe injuries. How was such knowledge acquired? Through observation, generations of accumulated experience, or traditions carefully preserved within the community? The settlement also provides fascinating insight into social organization. Unlike many later civilizations, Aşıklı reveals little evidence for dramatic differences in wealth or social status. Houses remain broadly similar in size and construction. Luxury goods are relatively rare. Monumental public buildings have not been clearly identified. Some archaeologists interpret this as evidence of relatively egalitarian social structures during the early Neolithic. Others urge caution. Social differences may have existed in forms that leave few archaeological traces. Authority does not always require palaces. Power can exist without monuments. Religion presents another enduring mystery. Unlike later Neolithic settlements such as Çatalhöyük, Aşıklı produced comparatively limited evidence for elaborate symbolic artwork or decorated ceremonial spaces, yet absence of obvious temples does not necessarily indicate absence of belief. Ritual often leaves subtle traces. Repeated burial practices, special treatment of particular objects, carefully maintained hearths, the deliberate rebuilding of houses upon ancestral foundations. Together, these patterns suggest systems of meaning that archaeology can observe, but not fully explain. One particularly fascinating aspect of Aşıklı is its relationship with fire. Numerous hearths, ovens, and ash deposits indicate careful control of domestic fire over many centuries. Fire provided warmth, cooked food, hardened tools, illuminated homes, and transformed raw materials. Yet it may also have carried symbolic significance. Several buildings appear to have been intentionally burned before reconstruction. Was this practical demolition, accidental destruction, or part of ceremonial renewal marking the end of one household and the beginning of another? The evidence remains open to interpretation. As with many prehistoric sites, the absence of writing encourages broader speculation. Some independent researchers have wondered whether early settlements like Aşıklı preserve forgotten systems of knowledge passed entirely through oral tradition. Others suggest that the remarkable continuity of architectural patterns reflects symbolic beliefs extending far beyond simple practicality. Could the layout itself have carried meanings now invisible to modern observers? Were houses arranged according to family relationships, seasonal cycles, or cosmological ideas no longer recoverable? At present, archaeology provides no definitive answers. Nevertheless, these questions continue encouraging fresh investigation as new analytical techniques become available. Modern science has transformed understanding of the settlement in remarkable ways. Ancient DNA analysis reconstructs biological relationships among buried individuals. Isotopic studies reveal childhood diets and migration patterns. Microscopic examination of plant remains identifies cultivated species with extraordinary precision. Soil chemistry detects activities invisible to the naked eye, while three-dimensional mapping preserves every architectural detail for future research. Each technological advance expands the picture, yet the emotional distance separating us from these people remains immense. No names survive, no stories, no songs, no spoken words, only footprints preserved in hardened floors, stone tools shaped by careful hands, the outlines of rooms where families once gathered around evening fires. Perhaps the greatest mystery surrounding Aşıklı is not how its inhabitants built their homes or managed their animals. It is how they experienced one of the most significant transformations in human history without knowing they were changing the future. They stood at the threshold between worlds. Behind them stretched hundreds of thousands of years of highly mobile existence. Ahead lay agriculture, cities, kingdoms, writing, empires, and civilizations yet unimaginable. Did they recognize that something extraordinary was happening? Or did change arrive so gradually that each generation noticed only small differences from the one before? As twilight settles across the Anatolian plain today, the low mound of Aşıklı appears almost indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape. Birds cross the evening sky above walls that have not sheltered families for nearly 10,000 years. Beneath the soil, countless stories remain preserved in silence, waiting for careful excavation to reveal another fragment of humanity's earliest chapters. Every buried foundation, every hearth, every obsidian blade, and every carefully placed burial reminds us that the origins of civilization were not shaped by legendary kings or monumental conquests, but by ordinary people making countless quiet decisions about where to live, how to care for one another, and how to build a future. Yet for all that archaeology has uncovered, Aşıklı still keeps many of its deepest secrets. Somewhere beneath the untouched portions of the mound, another discovery may still be waiting, one capable of changing not only our understanding of this remarkable settlement, but of the very moment when humanity first began to imagine permanence in a world that had always been defined by movement. If Aşıklı Settlement reminds us that humanity's earliest communities quietly transformed the course of civilization through ordinary lives and enduring traditions, our next destination carries us to the western edge of Europe, where another monument has challenged understanding for thousands of years. Here, the mystery does not lie beneath layers of forgotten homes, but inside a narrow stone passage where every surface seems to speak through symbols that no one has ever fully translated. It is a place where silence itself feels carefully preserved. Off the coast of Brittany in northwestern France, a small island rests quietly within the sheltered waters of the Gulf of Morbihan. Today it is known as Gavrinis, a peaceful landscape covered with grass, low vegetation, and scattered trees. Birds circle above the shoreline, while gentle waves lap against weathered rocks that have endured countless tides. At first glance, nothing about the island appears extraordinary. Yet rising from its highest point is an ancient mound of stone and earth that has captivated archaeologists, historians, and explorers for generations. Known as the Cairn of Gavrinis, this remarkable monument dates to approximately 3,500 BC, making it one of the oldest surviving megalithic structures in Europe. From the outside, it resembles a simple grassy hill measuring around 50 meters in diameter. Only upon approaching its narrow entrance does its true character begin to emerge. A low passage disappears into darkness, inviting visitors to leave daylight behind and enter a world carefully shaped by hands that lived nearly 6,000 years ago. Inside, the atmosphere changes immediately. The air grows cooler. Sound becomes softer. Every step echoes gently against ancient stone. The corridor extends for more than 13 meters before ending in a small central chamber constructed from enormous upright slabs supporting massive capstones overhead. Unlike many prehistoric monuments, however, the greatest wonder of Gavrinis is not its architecture alone. It is the carvings. Nearly every stone lining the passage has been covered with intricate engravings. Spirals unfold across the rock in graceful curves. Concentric circles expand outward like ripples on still water. Zigzag lines intersect with axe heads, curved shapes, serpentine forms, branching patterns, and symbols unlike anything found in modern writing. More than 29 decorated slabs transform the passage into one of the richest collections of Neolithic rock art anywhere in the world. The sheer scale of the work is astonishing. Creating these carvings required thousands of careful hammer strikes using stone tools upon extremely hard granite. Every line represents deliberate effort. Every pattern appears intentional. Yet despite decades of research, no one can say with certainty what these images were meant to communicate. For archaeologists, the cairn is generally understood as a passage tomb. Human remains recovered from similar monuments throughout Brittany support the interpretation that such structures played important roles in burial rituals, ancestor veneration, and ceremonial gatherings. The central chamber likely served as a sacred space where selected individuals were laid to rest, perhaps accompanied by offerings or ritual observances now lost to time. But if the monument was simply a tomb, why invest such extraordinary energy into decorating nearly every interior surface? This question has fascinated researchers for generations. One possibility is that the carvings formed part of a symbolic language understood by the communities who built the monument. Rather than functioning as decoration, the engravings may have represented myths, cosmological beliefs, territorial markers, or ceremonial knowledge transmitted across generations without written texts. Others suggest the symbols recorded observations of the natural world. The repeated spirals have often been compared with the movement of water, the growth of plants, or the apparent motion of the sun across the sky. Curving motifs resemble flowing rivers or ocean currents, fitting for a community living beside the Atlantic coast. Some researchers believe the imagery reflects cycles of life, death, and renewal expressed through natural forms familiar to Neolithic people. Astronomy has also entered the discussion. Like several other megalithic monuments across Europe, the entrance of Gavrinis displays a carefully considered orientation. During the winter solstice, sunlight penetrates the passage in a manner suggesting that seasonal observation may have influenced its design. Although not as dramatic as certain solar alignments elsewhere, the relationship between architecture and light has encouraged researchers to consider whether celestial events played a ceremonial role in the monument's use. If so, the passage may have symbolized more than a burial chamber. It could have represented a journey between darkness and light, death and renewal, or the recurring rhythms governing both nature and human existence. Yet even these interpretations leave countless questions unanswered. One of the most intriguing discoveries occurred only through careful modern investigation. Several decorated stones inside Gavrinis were once part of much larger monuments. Researchers realized that broken carvings continued onto fragments now found at nearby sites, including the Table des Marchands and Air Gras. When digitally reconstructed, these pieces appear to form sections of a single enormous standing stone that had originally been carved before being deliberately broken apart and reused within different monuments. Why would builders dismantle such an impressive megalith? Some archaeologists suggest practical reuse of available material. Others believe the act itself carried symbolic significance. Perhaps older sacred monuments were intentionally transformed into new ceremonial spaces, preserving ancestral memory while adapting changing religious traditions. No definitive explanation has emerged. The monument's engineering presents another enduring puzzle. Thousands of tons of stone were transported, shaped, and assembled without metal tools, wheeled vehicles, or draft animals. Massive capstones weighing many tons rest securely above the chamber, demonstrating impressive understanding of balance and structural stability. How were these stones moved? Experimental archaeology has shown that coordinated teams using wooden rollers, sledges, ropes, and earthen ramps could accomplish such tasks. Even so, witnessing the finished monument inspires admiration for the organizational skill and determination required. The island itself may once have looked very different. During the Neolithic period, sea levels were lower than they are today. Gavrinis may have been connected to the mainland, allowing easier access for the communities who constructed the cairn. As waters gradually rose over thousands of years, the monument became isolated upon its small island, transforming both its appearance and its relationship with the surrounding landscape. This changing geography adds another layer to its mystery. Modern visitors approach the cairn by boat, experiencing the monument as an isolated destination surrounded by water. Its original builders may have known a very different landscape entirely. Local folklore has naturally woven stories around the ancient mound. Generations living along the Breton coast regarded megalithic monuments as places inhabited by supernatural beings, hidden treasures, or forgotten giants. Legends described enchanted stones, mysterious lights, and ancient guardians protecting secrets buried beneath the earth. Such traditions cannot be verified through archaeology, yet they demonstrate how deeply these monuments continued shaping cultural imagination long after their creators had vanished. Modern technology has transformed the study of Gavrinis. Three-dimensional laser scanning has revealed microscopic carving details invisible to the naked eye. Digital reconstruction allows researchers to compare engraved stones with fragments scattered across neighboring sites. High-resolution imaging continues identifying previously overlooked patterns hidden beneath weathered surfaces. Every new technique reveals greater complexity, yet the essential mystery remains untouched. Who designed this extraordinary symbolic program? How was its meaning taught and remembered? What ceremonies unfolded inside the narrow passage as flickering torchlight danced across freshly carved spirals 6,000 years ago? Standing within the chamber today, surrounded by symbols whose creators never expected modern eyes to interpret them, it becomes impossible not to feel the weight of unanswered questions. Every carved line seems deliberate. Every motif appears meaningful. Yet the language they speak belongs to a world that disappeared long before history began recording names, kingdoms, or written beliefs. Perhaps the Cairn of Gavrinis is simply a masterpiece of Neolithic ritual architecture, preserving the spiritual traditions of an early farming community. Or perhaps its walls still conceal a forgotten system of knowledge that has waited thousands of years for someone to recognize the pattern hidden within the stone. If there is one lesson Gavrinis continues to teach, it is that ancient monuments rarely exist in isolation. They are often part of larger landscapes filled with connections that only become visible after centuries of careful study. As archaeologists expanded their investigations across Brittany, they began to notice striking similarities between Gavrinis and dozens of other megalithic sites scattered throughout the region. Passage tombs, standing stones, and stone circles appeared to form an intricate cultural network, suggesting that the people who built them shared ideas, beliefs, and engineering techniques across remarkable distances. This realization transformed the cairn from an isolated mystery into one chapter of a much larger story. The Gulf of Morbihan itself has long attracted attention. Its sheltered waters contain numerous islands, natural harbors, and fertile coastlines that would have supported thriving Neolithic communities. Rather than existing at the edge of the known world, Gavrinis may have occupied an important position within a vibrant maritime landscape. Boats carved from hollowed tree trunks could have crossed these calm waters with surprising efficiency, carrying people, livestock, tools, and perhaps even ceremonial traditions between distant settlements. If communities were already connected by the sea, ideas could travel as easily as goods. This possibility raises another fascinating question. Did specialized builders move from one community to another, carrying architectural knowledge accumulated over generations? The remarkable consistency found among many megalithic monuments suggests that construction techniques were not invented independently at every location. Instead, knowledge appears to have been shared, refined, and preserved over centuries without written manuals or formal schools. Such cooperation would have required extraordinary organization. Transporting enormous stones demanded hundreds of people working together with careful planning and precise coordination. Food had to be supplied, tools maintained, and labor directed toward a common goal. The monuments themselves hint at communities capable of sustained collaboration far beyond what earlier generations of researchers once imagined. Yet one mystery remains especially difficult to answer. Why were so many resources devoted to projects that offered no obvious practical benefit? The cairn could not grow crops. It produced no tools. It provided little ordinary shelter. Everything about its construction suggests that symbolic importance outweighed immediate necessity. Perhaps that is precisely the point. Throughout human history, societies have invested immense effort into places that express identity rather than survival alone. Cathedrals, temples, pyramids, and ceremonial landscapes all remind us that people often dedicate their greatest achievements to ideas that cannot be measured in material terms. Gavrinis may represent one of the earliest surviving examples of this deeply human impulse. Even the acoustics inside the passage have inspired investigation. Researchers conducting sound experiments observed that voices behave differently within the narrow corridor and central chamber. Echoes linger softly against the stone walls, while certain tones resonate more noticeably than others. Although these effects are entirely natural, some scholars have wondered whether ancient ceremonies intentionally incorporated chanting, music, or rhythmic sound to enhance the experience of entering the monument. Torchlight would have added another dimension. Unlike modern electric lighting, small flames produce constantly shifting shadows. As light flickered across the engraved stones, spirals and curved lines may have appeared almost animated, creating subtle illusions of movement. Symbols that seem static today might once have appeared alive during nighttime rituals, transforming the passage into an ever-changing visual experience. Of course, this remains speculative. No written account describes what participants actually saw or believed. Yet, considering how carefully every surface was carved, it seems reasonable to imagine that light, darkness, sound, and movement all contributed to the monument's original purpose. Another enduring puzzle concerns the remarkable precision of the engravings themselves. Some motifs repeat with only slight variations, suggesting that artists followed established conventions rather than improvising freely. This consistency hints at an underlying symbolic system whose rules were widely understood within Neolithic society. Whether those rules reflected mythology, astronomy, lineage, ritual practice, or something entirely different remains unknown. It is also possible that multiple meanings existed simultaneously. Modern thinking often separates art, religion, science, and social organization into distinct categories. Early farming communities may have experienced these ideas as inseparable aspects of a single worldview. A spiral might represent flowing water, the passage of seasons, ancestral continuity, and spiritual renewal all at once. If so, attempts to identify one single interpretation may overlook the richness of the monument's original meaning. As excavation and analysis continue, Gavrinis reminds us that the oldest mysteries are not always the loudest. They whisper through carefully carved lines, patiently waiting beneath layers of interpretation accumulated across thousands of years. Each generation asks new questions, applies new technologies, and uncovers new clues. Yet the monument continues preserving a silence that no instrument has fully broken. Perhaps that silence is itself part of its enduring legacy. Standing within the ancient passage, surrounded by symbols whose creators never expected to be understood by people living 6 millennia later, we are confronted with an extraordinary realization. Human hands carved every stone with purpose. Human minds conceived every pattern. And yet the complete story remains just beyond our reach, reminding us that even in an age of satellites, artificial intelligence, and advanced archaeology, some of humanity's oldest conversations are still waiting to be heard. As the echoes of the previous mystery begin to fade, another silent monument emerges from the mist, waiting patiently beneath the weight of thousands of years. Hidden on a small island off the coast of Brittany, France, surrounded by restless tides and shifting Atlantic winds, the Cairn of Gavrinis appears almost unremarkable at first glance. Covered with grass and blending naturally into the landscape, it resembles nothing more than a low, rounded hill. Yet beneath this quiet exterior lies one of the most astonishing prehistoric chambers ever discovered, a place where stone itself seems to preserve messages from an age that left behind no written language. Approaching Gavrinis is an experience unlike visiting most ancient monuments. The island is accessible only by boat, and as the shoreline slowly comes into view, the isolation becomes impossible to ignore. The sea muffles the sounds of the modern world, replacing them with waves, wind, and silence. Standing before the cairn, visitors often describe a strange sensation, as though they have crossed not just water, but time itself. Constructed around 3500 BC during the Neolithic period, the Cairn of Gavrinis is a masterpiece of prehistoric engineering. It consists of a long stone passage leading into a carefully built burial chamber, all enclosed beneath a massive mound of stone and earth. Although similar passage tombs can be found throughout Western Europe, Gavrinis occupies a special place among them because of the extraordinary artwork carved into its stones. Nearly every slab lining the passage is covered with intricate engravings. Spirals, zigzags, concentric circles, curved lines, axes, horn-like shapes, and abstract geometric forms fill the surfaces with astonishing precision. Unlike decorative carvings created simply for beauty, these markings appear deliberate, systematic, and deeply symbolic. Every stone seems to contribute to a larger visual language whose meaning has disappeared with the people who created it. For archaeologists, these carvings provide an invaluable glimpse into Neolithic culture. Many researchers believe the symbols represent religious beliefs, ceremonial practices, or aspects of everyday life transformed into sacred imagery. Stone axes, for example, may symbolize power or authority, while serpentine curves could represent rivers, energy, or cycles in nature. Others suggest that some motifs reflect agricultural traditions tied to fertility and seasonal renewal. Yet certainty remains frustratingly out of reach. Without written records, every interpretation remains an educated hypothesis. The people who built Gavrinis left behind magnificent architecture but no explanation of why these symbols mattered or how they were meant to be understood. Were they telling stories, recording rituals, mapping the heavens, or communicating ideas that no longer fit within modern ways of thinking? Adding to the mystery is the remarkable precision with which the monument was constructed. Massive stone slabs weighing several tons were transported across difficult terrain and assembled with impressive accuracy. The engineering required careful planning, coordinated labor, and sophisticated knowledge of construction techniques. This raises an enduring question. How did relatively small farming communities accomplish such ambitious projects using only simple tools made from stone, wood, and bone? Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that moving megaliths using ropes, rollers, and large groups of workers is certainly possible. With enough organization, determination, and time, communities could transport enormous stones over considerable distances. These practical demonstrations offer convincing explanations for much of the construction process. Even so, they do not fully explain the motivation. Why invest such extraordinary effort into building a chamber that would rarely, if ever, be seen by large numbers of people? Why devote countless hours to carving intricate designs deep within a narrow corridor, illuminated only by flickering torchlight? The artwork was not intended for casual admiration. It seems to have served a purpose known only to those who entered these sacred spaces. One particularly fascinating discovery has deepened the monument's sense of mystery. Researchers realized that several engraved stones used inside Gavrinis had originally belonged to much older standing monuments before being broken apart and reused. When fragments found at nearby sites were digitally reconstructed, portions of a much larger engraved image appeared to align across different stones. This suggests that enormous standing monuments may once have existed in the surrounding region before being intentionally dismantled. Why would prehistoric builders destroy earlier sacred monuments only to incorporate their pieces into new ones? Some scholars interpret this as evidence of changing religious traditions or evolving ceremonial practices. Reusing sacred stones may have preserved ancestral significance while adapting it to new cultural beliefs. Rather than erasing the past, the builders may have been honoring it through transformation. Others see something more symbolic. Perhaps the breaking of earlier monuments represented cycles of death and rebirth, mirroring natural patterns observed in the changing seasons. The stones themselves could have been viewed as living objects, carrying spiritual power from one generation into the next. Then there are the astronomical theories. Like several other Neolithic monuments across Europe, Gavrinis appears to exhibit careful orientation toward particular directions. Researchers have proposed that sunlight may have entered the passage in meaningful ways during specific times of year, possibly marking seasonal events important for agriculture or ceremonial gatherings. If correct, the monument would have functioned not only as a burial place, but also as a sophisticated calendar embedded within architecture. Ancient communities depended entirely upon understanding seasonal cycles. Knowing when to plant, harvest, or prepare for winter could determine survival. Encoding astronomical observations into permanent stone structures would have ensured that this essential knowledge endured across generations. Still, some researchers believe the carvings themselves may contain astronomical information. Certain repeated patterns have been compared to star clusters, lunar cycles, or celestial movements observed over many years. Although these interpretations remain controversial, they continue to inspire investigation because prehistoric societies often displayed surprisingly advanced observational skills. Beyond academic research, Gavrinis has naturally attracted more speculative ideas. Some independent writers have suggested that the geometric carvings form an unknown symbolic code waiting to be deciphered. Rather than representing simple decoration or religious imagery, they propose the symbols preserve forgotten mathematical concepts, navigational knowledge, or even instructions passed between generations through visual language alone. Others imagine the monument as a place dedicated to altered states of consciousness. The long, narrow passage creates a gradual transition from daylight into darkness. As visitors move deeper inside, sound changes, light fades, and the outside world disappears completely. Combined with chanting, torchlight, incense, or rhythmic drumming, the chamber could have produced deeply immersive ceremonial experiences capable of transforming perception itself. Whether these rituals sought communication with ancestors, spiritual forces, or symbolic journeys into another realm remains impossible to know. Some even point toward the remarkable acoustics within stone chambers like Gavrinis. Modern studies at several prehistoric monuments suggest that enclosed spaces can amplify certain frequencies, creating echoes and resonances unlike those heard outdoors. Could Neolithic builders have intentionally designed these environments to enhance ceremonies involving music or spoken ritual? No definitive evidence confirms such intentions, yet the possibility continues to intrigue researchers exploring the relationship between ancient architecture, sound, and human experience. Standing inside the chamber today, surrounded by stones carved more than 5,000 years ago, one cannot escape the feeling that these engravings were meant to communicate something profoundly important. The builders invested extraordinary effort into preserving messages that have survived almost intact, while the language needed to understand them vanished completely. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Gavrinis is not hidden beneath its stones, but within the silence between its symbols. A silence that has endured longer than most civilizations have existed, quietly waiting for someone who may never come to read what was written there. That silence has inspired generations of archaeologists, historians, and curious travelers to return again and again, each hoping that one overlooked detail might unlock the monument's forgotten purpose. Yet every new discovery seems to answer one question while raising several more. The Cairn of Gavrinis refuses to fit neatly into a single explanation, existing at the intersection of engineering, ritual, art, and memory. It is this delicate balance between what is known and what remains hidden that continues to make the site so compelling. Excavations have revealed that the burial chamber was used with great care, though surprisingly few human remains have been recovered compared to what might be expected from such an elaborate monument. This has prompted an intriguing debate among researchers. Was the chamber intended for the burial of only a select few individuals, perhaps leaders, shamans, or respected elders? Or did its purpose evolve over time, serving different ceremonial functions across generations? Some archaeologists believe the monument may have acted less as a cemetery and more as a sacred gathering place, where communities marked important moments in the cycle of life. Funerary rituals could have been only one aspect of a much broader spiritual tradition. The carefully decorated passage may have represented a symbolic journey rather than a simple physical route toward a burial chamber. If that interpretation is correct, every carved stone may have guided participants through a sequence of ideas understood instinctively by those who shared the culture. Much like later religious architecture would use paintings, stained glass, or sculptures to communicate beliefs. The builders of Gavrinis may have relied entirely upon engraved symbols whose meanings were taught orally from one generation to the next. The loss of that oral tradition is perhaps one of archaeology's greatest frustrations. Stone survives remarkably well. Stories do not. Because of this, modern observers are left examining fragments of an intellectual world that once existed in full. A spiral carved into granite may have represented the sun, the passage of time, a river, birth, death, or an idea with no modern equivalent at all. Without context, certainty slips away each time a new interpretation appears. Technology has begun offering fresh ways to study the monument without disturbing its fragile structure. High-resolution laser scanning, three-dimensional modeling, and advanced imaging techniques have revealed tiny details invisible to the naked eye. Minute variations in carving depth, tool marks, and surface wear allow researchers to reconstruct how individual stones were worked thousands of years ago. These studies suggest that the engravings were not created hastily. Many required careful planning and repeated controlled strikes using stone tools. Producing even a single decorated slab would have demanded remarkable patience. Covering nearly every stone in the passage with such intricate work represents an extraordinary investment of time. Why devote so much effort to symbols that would spend most of their existence hidden inside a sealed monument? One possibility is that visibility was never the point. In many ancient cultures, offerings were made for gods, ancestors, or unseen spiritual beings rather than for human audiences. The carvings may have carried meaning regardless of whether anyone looked upon them after completion. Their value could have resided in the act of creation itself. This idea resonates with similar practices found throughout history, where sacred spaces were designed for ritual rather than display. If Gavrinis belonged to such a tradition, then its true audience may never have been the living at all. Among alternative researchers, another hypothesis occasionally emerges. Some have proposed that the repeated geometric patterns resemble forms produced through altered states of consciousness. Neurological studies have shown that certain visual experiences, whether induced by meditation, rhythmic sound, sensory deprivation, or other conditions, can generate recurring geometric imagery such as spirals, zigzags, grids, and concentric shapes. Supporters of this theory suggest that prehistoric artists may have attempted to record profound visionary experiences within stone. The passage tomb, with its darkness, enclosed space, and separation from the outside world, could have provided an ideal setting for rituals intended to transform perception. Mainstream archaeology remains cautious about such interpretations, noting that similar geometric designs can arise for many reasons unrelated to altered consciousness. Even so, the overlap continues to provoke discussion, reminding us how little is truly known about prehistoric spiritual life. Then there is the broader landscape surrounding Gavrinis. The cairn does not stand alone. Across Brittany, countless megalithic structures, including standing stones, burial mounds, and ceremonial alignments, form one of the world's richest concentrations of prehistoric monuments. Rather than isolated constructions, they appear to belong to an interconnected cultural tradition extending across vast distances and many generations. This raises another compelling question. Were these monuments connected through shared beliefs, shared leadership, or shared knowledge passed between distant communities? Trade networks certainly existed during the Neolithic period, carrying valuable materials over remarkable distances. Ideas, rituals, and architectural techniques may have traveled alongside them. Gavrinis may therefore represent not an isolated achievement, but one chapter within a much larger story that remains only partially understood. Despite decades of research, every answer seems provisional. Archaeologists continue refining dates, reconstructing construction methods, and comparing carvings with those found at neighboring sites. Each advancement sharpens the picture, yet the central mystery endures. We can measure the stones, analyze the tools, and map the monument with extraordinary precision, but understanding the minds that conceived it remains far more elusive. Perhaps that is what gives Gavrinis its lasting power. Unlike ruins whose histories are preserved through written chronicles, this monument speaks in a language beyond words. Its builders entrusted their beliefs to stone, confident that the monument would outlive them. In that, they were unquestionably correct. More than 5 millennia later, their creation still stands against the Atlantic winds, remarkably intact, patiently resisting every attempt to reduce it to a single explanation. And so the carved passage remains suspended between history and mystery, a place where every engraved line hints at intention, every shadow suggests forgotten ritual, and every unanswered question reminds us that some of humanity's oldest secrets may still be waiting beneath the quiet surface of the ancient stones. If the Cairn of Gavrinis reminds us that ancient symbols can survive for thousands of years while their meanings slowly fade into silence, our journey now crosses the Atlantic to the arid northern coast of Peru. Here, another ceremonial monument stands against the passage of time, not hidden beneath grassy hills or carved into living rock, but rising from the desert itself. Its walls still carry vivid colors, its architecture preserves traces of forgotten rituals, and its discoveries continue challenging our understanding of one of South America's most remarkable civilizations. Between the vast Pacific Ocean and the towering Andes stretches a dry coastal plain where rain is rare and the landscape seems almost untouched by time. It is here, near the modern city of Trujillo, that Huaca de la Luna, known as the Temple of the Moon, rests beneath the shadow of Cerro Blanco, one of the region's largest mountains. The contrast is striking. Endless desert surrounds a monumental structure built from millions of adobe bricks, each one shaped by hand and carefully placed centuries ago. At first glance, Huaca de la Luna appears almost like a natural hill sculpted by wind and erosion. Layers of sun-baked adobe blend into the surrounding earth, giving the impression that the monument has always belonged to the desert. Yet as visitors move closer, geometric terraces, ceremonial platforms, towering walls, and broad plazas gradually emerge. Hidden beneath protective roofs are brilliantly preserved murals whose colors remain surprisingly vivid despite nearly 2,000 years of exposure. These paintings immediately distinguish Huaca de la Luna from many other ancient sites. Deep reds, brilliant yellows, white, black, and blue pigments still cover sections of interior walls, revealing elaborate images of supernatural beings, fierce animals, serpents, warriors, and ceremonial figures. The most recognizable image appears again and again throughout the temple. A powerful deity often identified by archaeologists as Ayapayak, sometimes called the Decapitator God. His face is unforgettable. Large, staring eyes dominate an expression somewhere between human and divine. Sharp feline fangs extend from his mouth. Serpents twist through his elaborate headdress, while stylized creatures surround him in carefully balanced compositions. Repeated hundreds of times throughout the monument, his image leaves little doubt that this figure occupied a central place within Moche religious belief. Huaca de la Luna served as one of the principal ceremonial centers of the Moche civilization, which flourished along Peru's northern coast between approximately AD 100 and AD 800. Unlike the later Inca Empire, the Moche did not leave behind a written language. Instead, their history survives through architecture, pottery, metalwork, textiles, murals, and the archaeological record. This absence of writing has transformed every discovery into an essential clue. The temple itself was not constructed all at once. Over many centuries, successive generations built new ceremonial platforms directly atop earlier ones. Rather than demolishing previous temples, they carefully enclosed them within new layers of adobe, creating a massive architectural archive. Each construction phase preserved older murals, stairways, and ceremonial spaces beneath fresh layers of brick. In effect, the temple became a growing monument to its own history. Modern excavations have peeled back these layers one by one, revealing remarkably preserved artwork hidden for centuries beneath later construction. Why the Moche repeatedly buried their own temples remains an intriguing question. Most archaeologists interpret this practice as ceremonial renewal. Rather than abandoning sacred architecture, each generation honored the past by sealing earlier structures within newly expanded temples. In doing so, the monument became both a place of worship and a physical record of cultural continuity. Yet the deeper symbolism remains uncertain. Did enclosing older temples represent rebirth? An offering to the gods? A sacred cycle mirroring death and renewal in nature? The answers remain hidden behind traditions that vanished long ago. Perhaps the most striking discoveries at Huaca de la Luna came not from its murals, but from its plazas. Beginning in the 1990s, archaeologists uncovered the remains of numerous individuals showing unmistakable evidence of ritual sacrifice. Many skeletons belonged to young adult males. Bones displayed cut marks, trauma, and signs of exposure before burial. Some bodies appeared deliberately placed in ceremonial arrangements rather than ordinary graves. Scientific analysis transformed understanding of these findings. Isotopic studies indicated that many sacrificed individuals were not local residents but warriors originating from different regions. Their injuries suggested participation in combat before death, supporting interpretations that ritual sacrifice followed ceremonial battles rather than random execution. These discoveries correspond remarkably well with scenes painted upon Moche ceramics. Numerous vessels depict armed warriors engaged in ritual combat, followed by processions in which defeated captives are presented before elite religious figures. Other images portray ceremonial offerings of blood to powerful deities. Together, archaeology and art appear to reinforce one another. Yet, even here, many questions remain. Why were these ceremonies considered necessary? Did participants believe sacrifice maintained cosmic balance? Appeased supernatural forces? Ensured agricultural fertility in one of the world's driest environments? Most researchers agree that religion, political authority, and environmental survival were deeply interconnected within Moche society. The exact relationship, however, remains difficult to reconstruct. Nature itself may provide part of the explanation. The Moche inhabited an exceptionally fragile environment where prosperous agriculture depended upon carefully managed irrigation systems fed by rivers descending from the Andes. Periodic El Niño events brought devastating floods, while prolonged drought threatened crops and entire communities. In such unpredictable conditions, ceremonies intended to restore harmony between humanity and powerful natural forces may have carried profound importance. Some archaeologists suggest that ritual sacrifice intensified during periods of environmental stress. Evidence from certain excavation layers appears consistent with episodes of extreme flooding, followed by ceremonial activity. Although direct cause and effect relationships remain difficult to establish, the possibility continues attracting careful investigation. The murals themselves deepen the mystery. Beyond recognizable deities, countless symbolic elements remain only partially understood. Hybrid creatures combine human, feline, bird, and serpent characteristics. Geometric designs repeat across multiple construction phases with remarkable consistency. Certain figures appear engaged in elaborate ceremonies whose meaning survives only through fragmented visual clues. Were these scenes recording myths, historical events, religious instruction, or symbolic narratives understood only by initiated participants? Without written texts, interpretation remains necessarily cautious. Independent researchers have occasionally proposed broader theories. Some view the repeated imagery as evidence of sophisticated cosmological systems connecting celestial cycles, seasonal change, and ritual practice. Others suggest hidden numerical patterns embedded within architectural layouts or mural compositions. While mainstream archaeology acknowledges the complexity of Moche symbolism, definitive evidence supporting such interpretations remains elusive. Still, the extraordinary consistency of artistic motifs across centuries suggests carefully preserved traditions extending far beyond simple decoration. Modern technology continues revealing remarkable new details. Microscopic pigment analysis reconstructs ancient painting techniques. Ground-penetrating radar identifies buried architectural phases awaiting excavation. DNA analysis of human remains sheds light on kinship, migration, and health. Environmental studies reconstruct ancient climate conditions surrounding periods of construction and sacrifice. Each discovery strengthens understanding of Moche civilization. Yet each answer also uncovers additional mysteries. How were religious leaders chosen? What stories accompanied the painted images covering temple walls? How much knowledge disappeared forever because it was transmitted through ceremony rather than writing? Standing within the temple today, surrounded by towering adobe walls illuminated by desert sunlight, it becomes difficult not to imagine the countless ceremonies once performed here. Priests climbed monumental stairways carrying offerings. Musicians filled plazas with rhythmic sounds now lost to history. Warriors entered sacred spaces whose meanings shaped every aspect of their world. Above them all, the painted face of Apayek watched silently from the walls, unchanged through centuries of rebuilding. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Huaca de la Luna lies not in its sacrifices or its extraordinary murals, but in its remarkable ability to preserve fragments of a civilization whose voice has otherwise fallen silent. The temple continues offering clues through every layer of adobe, every painted figure, and every carefully excavated plaza. Yet somewhere beneath those surviving walls, hidden within unexcavated chambers or symbols still awaiting interpretation, another chapter of the Moche story may remain untouched, waiting patiently beneath the desert for the moment when history is ready to uncover it. If Huaca de la Luna reminds us that entire belief systems can be preserved within layers of adobe and painted stone, our journey now leads far from the deserts of Peru to the rugged highlands of the South Caucasus. Here, the mystery is neither hidden beneath ceremonial temples nor recorded in colorful murals. Instead, it stands exposed to the wind, scattered across an open plateau where towering stones have watched the changing seasons for thousands of years. Their purpose has been debated for generations, and despite decades of study, they continue to resist simple explanation. High above the Voratan River Gorge in southern Armenia lies a windswept landscape where rolling grasslands stretch toward distant mountains. The air is crisp, and the silence is broken only by the sound of passing wind and the occasional call of birds circling overhead. Rising from this quiet plain is one of the region's most enigmatic archaeological sites, known as Carahunge, sometimes called Zorat's Karer, or the Armenian Stonehenge. From a distance, the monument appears almost random. Hundreds of dark basalt stones stand upright across the plateau, some leaning slightly after centuries of exposure, others remaining remarkably straight despite the harsh climate. Their weathered surfaces carry the marks of countless winters, while patches of lichen soften their once sharp edges. As visitors walk among them, however, the apparent disorder gradually gives way to recognizable patterns. Long rows of standing stones extend outward from a central cluster. Some form narrow alignments, while others define irregular circles and branching avenues. Altogether, more than 200 stones occupy the site, creating a landscape that feels simultaneously natural and carefully arranged. Many of the stones share one particularly unusual feature. Dozens contain precisely carved circular holes near their upper sections. These openings, only a few centimeters in diameter, pass completely through the basalt. Looking through one, the distant horizon suddenly appears framed with surprising precision, as though the stone itself had become a fixed viewing instrument. It is these mysterious perforations that have fueled decades of fascination. Who carved them? Why were they placed at specific heights and angles? What purpose did they serve? Mainstream archaeology generally dates portions of Carahunge to the Bronze Age or Iron Age, although some researchers suggest that certain elements of the site may be considerably older. Like many ancient monuments used over long periods, Carahunge likely experienced multiple phases of construction, modification, and reuse, making precise dating exceptionally challenging. Excavations have uncovered evidence of nearby burials, stone cists, and settlement activity, indicating that the monument formed part of a broader cultural landscape rather than standing in complete isolation. Many archaeologists interpret Carahunge primarily as a ceremonial and funerary complex. Its association with burial structures suggests that remembrance of the dead played an important role in the site's original function. Standing stones frequently served as ritual markers throughout prehistoric Eurasia, defining sacred spaces where ceremonies connected communities with ancestors and the surrounding landscape. Yet this explanation leaves one central question unresolved. Why drill holes through so many of the stones? Among the most widely discussed theories is the possibility that Carahunge functioned, at least in part, as an ancient astronomical observatory. Several independent researchers have proposed that particular stones align with the rising or setting positions of the sun, moon, and prominent stars during significant times of the year. Looking through selected holes, they argue, allows surprisingly accurate observation of celestial events, including solstices and certain stellar appearances. If true, the monument could represent one of the oldest known astronomical complexes in the world. The idea is undeniably intriguing. Ancient societies across many regions carefully observed the heavens to regulate agriculture, ritual calendars, and seasonal migration. Monuments aligned with celestial events are well documented elsewhere, making the possibility worthy of careful investigation. However, the evidence at Carahunge remains the subject of ongoing debate. Many archaeologists caution that while some alignments may indeed exist, others could result from coincidence within a site containing hundreds of stones. Over thousands of years, shifting ground, erosion, and fallen stones have altered the monument's original appearance, making reconstruction of its earliest configuration difficult. The carved holes themselves complicate interpretation further. Some researchers suggest they were intended for astronomical observation. Others propose entirely different purposes. They may have supported wooden beams, ceremonial banners, or other structures now lost to time. Some have suggested practical uses involving ropes or construction methods, while others believe the openings carried symbolic significance unrelated to observation altogether. At present, no single explanation satisfies every detail. The monument's location also invites reflection. Carahunge occupies elevated ground with broad visibility across the surrounding valleys and mountains. Such positions often carried ceremonial importance in prehistoric cultures, linking earth and sky within a single sacred landscape. Standing among the stones, surrounded by open horizons in every direction, it becomes easy to understand why generations might have regarded this place as spiritually significant. The wind itself contributes to the atmosphere. Local tradition holds that when air passes through the perforated stones, faint whistling sounds can sometimes be heard. Whether caused by specific weather conditions or simply the imagination encouraged by such an unusual setting, these stories have become part of Carahunge's enduring identity. It is perhaps no surprise that folklore has grown around the monument. Legends describe ancient giants, forgotten kings, sacred gatherings, and mysterious powers associated with the standing stones. Some stories suggest that the site preserves knowledge inherited from civilizations long vanished. Others speak of celestial visitors or hidden energies concentrated within the plateau. Such traditions belong to the rich fabric of local cultural memory rather than established history. Yet they demonstrate how deeply the monument has shaped the imagination of those living nearby. Modern archaeological techniques continue revealing new information. High-resolution mapping has documented the precise position of every surviving stone. Geological analysis identifies the basalt's origins and methods of shaping. Excavations explore nearby burial features, while computer simulations test proposed astronomical alignments under ancient sky conditions. Each study contributes another piece to the puzzle. Yet none has produced a final answer. The monument remains suspended between several plausible interpretations, each supported by certain observations while leaving other questions unresolved. Perhaps this uncertainty reflects the site's long history. Carahunge may never have served only one purpose. Across centuries, successive communities could have adapted the monument to changing beliefs, adding stones, modifying alignments, and assigning fresh meanings to an already ancient landscape. What began as a burial ground might later have become a ceremonial center. What once held ritual significance may eventually have acquired astronomical importance, or the reverse. Ancient monuments rarely remain frozen in time. They evolve alongside the people who continue using them. As twilight settles across the Armenian highlands, the basalt pillars cast long shadows over the grass. The distant mountains gradually fade into blue silhouettes, while the first stars begin appearing overhead, just as they have for countless generations. Whether those stars were carefully measured by prehistoric observers or simply admired as part of a sacred landscape remains uncertain. Standing among the silent stones, one cannot escape the sense that Carahunge still holds conversations with the sky. Every carved opening frames a fragment of the horizon. Every standing pillar marks a deliberate human choice made so long ago that its original purpose has become almost impossible to recover. Perhaps the monument is best understood not as a single mystery waiting for one final solution, but as a place where multiple layers of history, ritual, observation, and memory overlap. And somewhere among those weathered basalt stones, aligned with a distant peak or a forgotten star, another clue may still be waiting for the moment when someone looks through the right opening at precisely the right time. The longer researchers examine Carahunge, the more they recognize that its greatest mystery may not lie in any single stone, but in the monument as a whole. Every upright pillar exists in relation to another. Distances, orientations, elevations, and sightlines all contribute to a landscape that appears intentionally organized, even if its original plan has become difficult to reconstruct after thousands of years of natural change. Several stones no longer stand where they once did. Some have fallen completely. Others lean at noticeable angles, shifted by earthquakes, frost, or the slow movement of the ground beneath them. A few may even have been relocated during different periods of occupation. These changes complicate every attempt to determine the site's original appearance. A single displaced stone can alter an alignment that may once have carried ceremonial or practical significance. This uncertainty has encouraged caution among archaeologists. While astronomical interpretations continue attracting public attention, many specialists emphasize that prehistoric monuments often fulfilled multiple roles simultaneously. A place used for observing seasonal changes could also serve as a burial ground, a gathering place, or a ceremonial landscape. Ancient communities rarely separated religion, astronomy, governance, and daily life into distinct categories in the way modern societies often do. Carahunge may represent precisely this kind of interconnected world. The surrounding environment offers additional clues. The South Caucasus has long served as a crossroads between Europe and Asia, where cultures, technologies, and traditions moved across mountain passes and fertile valleys for thousands of years. Communities living in this region interacted with neighboring peoples through trade, migration, and shared knowledge. Ideas traveled alongside goods, gradually shaping local customs while preserving distinctive regional identities. Within this broader cultural setting, Carahunge may have occupied a special place. Its elevated position provided sweeping views of the surrounding landscape, allowing anyone standing among the stones to observe both the heavens above and the valleys below. Such locations often carried symbolic importance, linking the human world with larger forces of nature that governed seasons, weather, and survival. Excavations around the monument have uncovered artifacts suggesting long-term activity rather than brief occupation. Fragments of pottery, stone tools, burial features, and architectural remains indicate that people returned here repeatedly across different eras. Some discoveries belong to the Bronze Age, while others appear to reflect later periods. Rather than representing a single moment in history, Carahunge seems to preserve a sequence of changing traditions extending across centuries. This continuity raises another fascinating question. Did later generations fully understand the intentions of those who first erected the stones? Or were they, like us, inheriting an ancient monument whose earliest meanings had already begun to fade? History offers many examples of civilizations adapting older sacred places to fit new beliefs. Temples become churches. Shrines become monuments. Ancient gathering places acquire fresh significance without entirely losing their connection to the past. Perhaps Carahunge experienced a similar evolution. The monument's unusual perforated stones continue inspiring investigation. Computer modeling has shown that some openings align with distant landscape features, while others face broad sections of open sky. Whether these orientations were intentional or incidental remains debated, yet they encourage researchers to think beyond simple explanations. The holes may have framed stars, marked seasonal sunrise points, directed ceremonial processions, or fulfilled functions no longer imaginable from surviving evidence alone. Whatever their purpose, the precision required to carve them into hard basalt speaks of careful planning rather than chance. Local traditions preserve another dimension of the site's identity. For generations, nearby communities regarded the standing stones with a mixture of familiarity and respect. Stories passed from one generation to the next described ancient gatherings, sacred places, and unexplained events associated with the plateau. Although folklore cannot establish historical fact, it often reflects a landscape's enduring importance within cultural memory. Even after the original builders disappeared, the stones continued shaping human imagination. Modern technology is gradually adding new chapters to the investigation. Satellite imagery reveals subtle patterns extending beyond the visible monument. Three-dimensional scanning records each stone with extraordinary accuracy, allowing researchers to compare weathering, carving techniques, and structural relationships in ways previously impossible. Environmental studies reconstruct ancient vegetation and climate, helping archaeologists better understand the world in which the monument first emerged. Yet despite these advances, Carahunge refuses to surrender a single definitive explanation. Instead, every new discovery seems to broaden the range of possibilities. Perhaps that is what makes the site so compelling. Unlike mysteries built entirely upon legend, Carahunge presents real stones, real craftsmanship, and real archaeological evidence. The questions arise not because the monument lacks substance, but because it possesses so much of it. Every confirmed fact opens another avenue of inquiry. Who first envisioned arranging these basalt pillars across the plateau? How many generations participated in expanding or modifying the site? What ceremonies unfolded beneath the same stars that still appear above the Armenian highlands today? As night settles across the landscape, the standing stones become dark silhouettes against the sky. One by one, constellations emerge overhead, just as they did thousands of years ago. Wind moves quietly through the open plain, brushing against weathered surfaces that have endured countless seasons without revealing their full story. Perhaps the builders once looked upward for guidance, measuring time through the heavens. Perhaps they gathered here to honor ancestors whose names vanished long before recorded history began. Or perhaps the monument fulfilled purposes so deeply woven into their culture that no surviving evidence can fully recover them. For now, Carahunge remains suspended between certainty and possibility. It stands not as a monument demanding extraordinary explanations, but as a reminder that some of humanity's oldest achievements continue inviting careful observation. Somewhere within the arrangement of its stones, the rhythm of its landscape, or the silent geometry of its carved openings, another piece of the puzzle may still be waiting, patiently enduring the passage of time beneath the same sky that first inspired its creation. If Carahunge reminds us that a landscape of standing stones can preserve questions long after the people who raised them have disappeared, our journey now returns to the Atlantic coast of Western Europe, where another monument expands that mystery on an almost unimaginable scale. Here, the stones do not stand alone or gather in a single circle. Instead, they stretch across the countryside in disciplined rows, disappearing toward the horizon as though following a pattern that only their builders truly understood. Along the southern coast of Brittany in northwestern France, gentle hills roll toward the Atlantic Ocean, where changing tides and cool sea winds have shaped the landscape for thousands of years. Fields of grass, quiet woodlands, and narrow country roads weave through a region that appears peaceful and familiar. Yet hidden within this tranquil countryside lies one of the greatest concentrations of prehistoric monuments anywhere on Earth. The Carnac Alignments are unlike anything else in the ancient world. Across several kilometers, more than 3,000 standing stones rise from the earth in remarkably ordered lines. Some barely reach waist height, while others tower several meters above the ground. Weathered granite pillars stand shoulder to shoulder in long, carefully arranged rows that extend across fields, over gentle slopes, and toward distant woodlands. From above, the monument resembles a vast, geometric design etched across the landscape itself. Walking among these stones is an unforgettable experience. The rows seem almost endless. As one alignment disappears into the distance, another emerges beyond it. Individual stones vary in size and shape, yet together they create an unmistakable sense of deliberate organization. The silence between them feels unusually complete, interrupted only by birdsong and the steady movement of wind across the open fields. Unlike many prehistoric monuments centered around a single structure, Carnac is not one monument but an entire ceremonial landscape. The alignments are generally divided into several major groups, including Menek, Kermario, Kurliskan, and Le Petit Menek. Each possesses its own arrangement while contributing to a larger pattern whose overall purpose remains uncertain. Nearby, ancient burial mounds, passage graves, dolmens, and isolated standing stones suggest that the alignments formed part of a much broader sacred landscape used over many centuries. Radiocarbon dating and archaeological evidence indicate that much of the complex was erected between approximately 4,500 and 3,300 BC, placing its origins deep within the Neolithic period. This means the Carnac alignments are older than Stonehenge and roughly contemporary with some of Europe's earliest monumental architecture. The achievement is extraordinary. Transporting and raising thousands of granite stones without metal tools, wheeled vehicles, or advanced machinery required remarkable planning, cooperation, and determination. Many of the largest stones weigh several tons, demanding coordinated labor from substantial communities. Why would Neolithic people invest such enormous effort into arranging stones across such a vast area? This question has inspired centuries of investigation. One of the earliest explanations came from local folklore. Legends claimed the stones were once Roman soldiers transformed into granite by supernatural intervention. Other stories spoke of giants, saints, or enchanted armies frozen forever where they stood. Such tales belong to mythology rather than history, yet they reveal how generations struggled to explain a monument whose true origins had already faded from memory. Modern archaeology offers more grounded possibilities. Many researchers interpret the alignments as ceremonial spaces connected with religious practice, community gatherings, or ancestor veneration. Their proximity to burial monuments supports the idea that death, memory, and ritual played important roles within the landscape. Yet this interpretation alone does not explain the remarkable precision of the rows. The stones appear neither random nor purely decorative. Their arrangement suggests careful planning according to principles that remain only partly understood. Astronomy naturally entered the discussion. Some investigators have proposed that portions of the alignments correspond with significant solar or lunar events, allowing prehistoric observers to monitor seasonal cycles essential for agriculture and ceremonial life. Certain rows appear oriented toward points on the horizon where the sun rises or sets during important times of the year. However, the evidence remains complex, with thousands of stones extending across multiple alignments. Distinguishing intentional astronomical design from coincidental orientation is challenging. While some relationships with celestial events appear plausible, archaeologists continue debating whether astronomy served as the primary purpose or simply one aspect of a much broader ceremonial landscape. Another possibility considers movement rather than observation. The long rows may have guided ceremonial processions, leading participants through carefully defined pathways during important rituals. Walking between parallel lines of towering stones creates a striking visual experience. The monument directs attention forward while limiting the surrounding view, subtly shaping how individuals move through the landscape. Perhaps the journey itself held symbolic meaning. Rather than serving as a destination, the alignments may have transformed ordinary walking into ceremonial experience, connecting different sacred spaces across the landscape. The changing size of the stones adds another layer to the mystery. In several alignments, larger stones gradually give way to smaller ones, or the reverse. Whether this reflects practical construction methods, symbolic hierarchy, or chronological development remains uncertain. Every pattern seems deliberate, yet its meaning continues to elude definitive explanation. Recent archaeological studies suggest that Carnac did not appear overnight. Instead, the complex likely developed gradually as successive generations expanded earlier arrangements, adding new stones while preserving older sections. This slow evolution resembles other great prehistoric ceremonial landscapes, where monuments accumulated over centuries rather than through single construction campaigns. If true, Carnac reflects not merely architectural ambition, but extraordinary cultural continuity. Entire generations maintained shared traditions long enough to complete projects extending far beyond individual lifetimes. The surrounding environment also deserves attention. When the earliest stones were raised, sea levels, vegetation, and coastlines differed from those seen today. Ancient forests covered portions of the region, while changing environmental conditions gradually reshaped the landscape surrounding the monument. The builders experienced a world both familiar and subtly different from modern Brittany. Understanding that ancient environment may prove essential to solving the monument's purpose. Certain alignments now ending in open fields may once have pointed toward forests, waterways, or prominent natural landmarks that no longer exist. Independent researchers have proposed more speculative ideas as well. Some view the alignments as enormous symbolic maps representing celestial patterns or sacred geography. Others imagine forgotten systems of measurement encoded within the spacing of the stones. A few have even suggested that the monument reflects sophisticated knowledge of Earth itself, connecting natural forces with ceremonial architecture. Such interpretations remain outside established archaeological consensus. Yet they persist because Carnac possesses a scale unlike almost any comparable monument. Its sheer size encourages questions that simple explanations do not always satisfy. Modern technology continues transforming research. Airborne laser scanning reveals subtle landscape features hidden beneath vegetation. Geophysical surveys detect buried structures surrounding the visible stones. Geographic information systems allow precise analysis of orientation, spacing, and topography across the entire complex. Every new dataset enriches understanding while revealing additional complexity. Perhaps the greatest lesson offered by Carnac is that prehistoric societies possessed organizational abilities often underestimated by the modern imagination. Raising thousands of standing stones required planning, cooperation, engineering skill, and deeply shared cultural beliefs. Whether motivated by religion, astronomy, social identity, or a combination of many factors, the builders created a monument that has survived for more than 5,000 years. As evening settles across the Breton countryside, the granite rows cast long shadows over the grass. One after another, the stones seem to fade into the gathering twilight until only their silhouettes remain against the horizon. Standing among them, it becomes impossible to ignore the quiet rhythm of repetition stretching across the landscape. Every pillar marks a deliberate human decision. Every alignment hints at a larger design that has outlived its creators by millennia. If the Carnac alignments remind us that entire landscapes can become monuments whose original purpose fades into uncertainty, our journey now carries us deep into the tropical forests of Southeast Asia. Here, the mystery is no longer expressed through endless rows of standing stones, but through silent brick towers slowly being reclaimed by towering trees. Hidden beneath dense jungle canopies, an ancient capital still whispers the story of a civilization that flourished centuries before the great temples of Angkor, yet remains far less understood. In the heart of central Cambodia, where forests stretch across fertile plains and seasonal rivers weave quietly through the countryside, the ancient sanctuary of Sambor Prei Kuk emerges almost unexpectedly from the vegetation. Massive tree roots embrace weathered temples, while vines climb walls that have stood for nearly 14 centuries. Shafts of sunlight filter through thick foliage, illuminating red brick towers whose intricate carvings have softened beneath centuries of rain, heat, and moss. The atmosphere is remarkably peaceful. Unlike crowded archaeological sites dominated by monumental stone architecture, Sambor Prei Kuk possesses an almost intimate silence. Birds move through the canopy overhead. Leaves rustle with the slightest breeze. Every narrow pathway seems to disappear into another cluster of ancient structures hidden among the trees. It is easy to forget that this quiet forest was once the center of a powerful kingdom. Long before Angkor became the political and religious heart of the Khmer Empire, Sambor Prei Kuk served as the capital of the Chenla kingdom. Known historically as Ishanapura, the city flourished during the 6th and 7th centuries AD under rulers who helped shape the foundations of later Khmer civilization. Today, more than 100 surviving temple structures remain scattered across the landscape. Many stand alone among the trees, while others form carefully planned groups connected by ancient pathways. Most were constructed primarily from reddish brick, decorated with sandstone lintels, carved columns, and elaborate ornamental details displaying remarkable craftsmanship. One feature immediately distinguishes Sambor Prei Kuk from many later Khmer sites. Several temples possess octagonal designs rather than the familiar square plans seen elsewhere. These unusual structures remain among the earliest surviving examples of their kind in Southeast Asia. Their purpose has intrigued archaeologists for decades. Why choose such an uncommon architectural form? Was the shape symbolic, ceremonial, or simply an experimental stage in the evolution of Khmer temple design? The available evidence allows several possibilities, but no definitive answer. Religion shaped nearly every aspect of the ancient city. Most temples were dedicated to Hindu deities, particularly Shiva, whose worship occupied a central place within Chenla royal ideology. Stone lingams, sacred symbols associated with Shiva, once stood within many temple sanctuaries, while inscriptions record royal patronage, religious ceremonies, and generous offerings made to the temples. These inscriptions provide invaluable historical information. Unlike many ancient civilizations explored throughout our journey, the people of Sambor Prei Kuk left written records carved into stone. They identify rulers, describe donations, and preserve fragments of political and religious history. Yet even with these texts, much remains uncertain. The inscriptions illuminate names and events. They rarely explain belief itself. Walking through the forest today, one notices that many temples appear partially consumed by nature. Towering strangler figs wrap their roots around ancient brickwork. Massive trees rise from walls constructed more than 1,000 years earlier. Moss blankets carvings that once displayed crisp artistic detail. Rather than destroying the temples entirely, the forest seems to have entered into a slow partnership with them. Stone and tree coexist. Architecture and nature become inseparable. This remarkable setting naturally encourages reflection. How did such an important capital become abandoned? Historical evidence suggests that political centers gradually shifted elsewhere as new kingdoms emerged and changing dynasties redirected power. Over time, forests reclaimed areas once filled with priests, artisans, merchants, and royal officials. Yet the transition was probably gradual rather than sudden. Cities rarely vanish overnight. Instead, populations decline. Buildings fall into disrepair. Roads disappear beneath vegetation. Eventually, silence replaces daily life. Archaeological investigations continue revealing how extensive the ancient city may once have been. Beyond the surviving temples lie traces of reservoirs, roads, embankments, and residential districts now hidden beneath the forest floor. Remote sensing technologies, including airborne laser scanning, have begun identifying subtle landscape features invisible from ground level. Each new survey expands the known boundaries of the city. The ceremonial complexes visible today may represent only a small portion of the original capital. One particularly fascinating aspect of Sambor Prei Kuk is its artistic style. Decorative carvings display elegant floral designs, mythical creatures, guardian figures, and intricate geometric patterns that later influenced Khmer architecture on a much larger scale. In many respects, the site represents an important bridge between earlier regional traditions and the monumental achievements that would eventually culminate at Angkor. It preserves the evolution of an artistic language still taking shape. Yet despite this historical importance, Sambor Prei Kuk remains comparatively little known outside archaeological circles. Perhaps this relative obscurity has helped preserve its quiet atmosphere. Without overwhelming crowds, the forest continues dominating the experience. The temples appear not as isolated museum pieces, but as surviving fragments of an ancient landscape still connected to its natural surroundings. Some mysteries emerge from the architecture itself. Several temples contain false doors, beautifully carved entrances leading nowhere. These symbolic doorways appear throughout Khmer religious architecture, but their exact spiritual significance remains debated. Were they intended as portals for divine beings, representations of unseen worlds, architectural expressions of sacred presence? Modern scholars continue exploring these possibilities. The surrounding forest has also given rise to local traditions. Stories speak of guardian spirits watching over forgotten sanctuaries, mysterious sounds echoing through the trees after sunset, and hidden chambers still concealed beneath collapsed structures. Such accounts belong to folklore rather than documented history, yet they reveal how strongly the ancient city continues influencing cultural imagination. Independent researchers have occasionally proposed broader theories as well. Some suggest undiscovered ceremonial complexes still lie buried beneath dense vegetation. Others speculate that the city's layout reflects symbolic cosmological principles not yet fully recognized through archaeological investigation. While such ideas remain unconfirmed, ongoing discoveries continue demonstrating that much of the ancient capital has yet to be explored. Modern science is steadily uncovering new evidence. Ground-penetrating radar identifies buried foundations. Three-dimensional scanning records delicate carvings threatened by erosion. Conservation specialists analyze ancient brick-making techniques whose durability continues to impress modern engineers. Botanical studies examine how vegetation both protects and damages surviving structures. Every investigation reveals greater complexity, yet every answer introduces fresh questions. Who designed this remarkable city? How many temples remain hidden beneath the forest? What ceremonies once unfolded within sanctuaries where only birds and wind now pass? Standing before one of the octagonal temples as afternoon light filters through towering trees, it becomes difficult to separate the ancient city from the living forest surrounding it. Brick towers rise from carpets of fallen leaves. Roots embrace walls built by forgotten craftsmen. Silence settles over spaces once filled with ritual, music, and prayer. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Sambor Prei Kuk is not why it was abandoned, but how it continues preserving the memory of a civilization that shaped the future while gradually disappearing into the landscape it once transformed. Every temple, inscription, and hidden foundation offers another glimpse into that forgotten world, yet vast portions of the ancient capital remain concealed beneath layers of soil and forest. Somewhere beyond the visible ruins, where roots still grip untouched walls and unexcavated chambers rest beneath centuries of earth, another chapter of this remarkable city may still be waiting, patiently hidden within the jungle, where history and nature continue their quiet conversation. The deeper one ventures into Sambor Prei Kuk, the more the forest begins to reshape every sense of distance and time. Narrow paths wind between temple groups, sometimes disappearing beneath fallen leaves before emerging beside another weathered sanctuary. What appears to be an isolated ruin often reveals itself as part of a much larger arrangement, connected by ancient roads, embankments, and ceremonial spaces now almost invisible beneath centuries of natural growth. This hidden complexity has become one of the site's most compelling characteristics. Archaeologists no longer view Sambor Prei Kuk simply as a collection of scattered temples. Increasingly, it is understood as the surviving heart of an extensive urban landscape whose true dimensions are only beginning to emerge. Around the visible monuments once stood residential districts, workshops, reservoirs, gardens, and administrative buildings supporting a thriving royal capital. Most of these structures were built from wood. Unlike the brick temples that endured the centuries, wooden houses gradually returned to the earth after generations of abandonment. Their disappearance creates an unusual archaeological challenge. The most sacred buildings survive, while the everyday city that surrounded them exists primarily through subtle traces preserved beneath the soil. In many ways, this creates an incomplete portrait. The temples remain. The people have vanished. Yet careful excavation continues recovering fragments of ordinary life. Pottery, metal tools, beads, ceramics, food remains, and manufacturing debris reveal that Sambor Prei Kuk was not simply a ceremonial center, but a living city where artisans, traders, priests, and families carried out their daily routines beneath the tropical canopy. Water also played a central role in shaping the ancient capital. Seasonal rainfall governed agriculture throughout the region, making careful water management essential for long-term prosperity. Archaeologists have identified reservoirs, canals, and hydraulic features suggesting sophisticated planning long before the better-known engineering achievements of Angkor. These systems demonstrate remarkable environmental understanding. Rather than resisting the rhythms of the landscape, the builders adapted to them, creating infrastructure capable of supporting both urban life and religious activity. The temples themselves continue offering subtle clues. Many entrances face carefully chosen directions, while decorative carvings repeat symbolic motifs associated with divine protection, cosmic order, and royal authority. Lions guard stairways. Mythical creatures emerge from stone lintels. Delicate floral patterns frame sacred doorways leading toward inner sanctuaries once occupied by revered religious images. Some sculptures have disappeared through centuries of looting and natural decay. Others remain exactly where ancient craftsmen placed them. Together, they preserve fragments of an artistic tradition that would later flourish across the Khmer world. One of the most intriguing aspects of Sambor Prei Kuk is the balance between permanence and change. The temples were clearly intended to endure. The surrounding city evolved continuously. Buildings were repaired, expanded, and modified as rulers changed and religious practices developed. Like many ancient capitals, the city was never truly finished. It grew alongside the civilization that created it. This gradual evolution complicates modern interpretation. Structures from different periods often overlap. Earlier foundations support later buildings. Architectural styles reveal changing influences while preserving remarkable continuity. Every excavation uncovers another layer within a story that unfolded across generations rather than decades. The forest adds another dimension to that story. Towering trees now stand where royal processions once passed. Birds nest within sanctuaries that formerly echoed with ritual chants. Thick roots surround foundations without entirely destroying them, creating the impression that nature has chosen not to erase the city, but to shelter it beneath a living canopy. That relationship has fascinated visitors for centuries. Some local traditions describe the forest as a guardian protecting sacred places until the proper time for their rediscovery. Others speak of unseen presences watching quietly over abandoned temples long after their builders disappeared. Such stories cannot be verified through archaeology, yet they capture something many visitors instinctively feel. Sambor Prei Kuk possesses an atmosphere unlike most archaeological sites. Its silence does not seem empty. it feels inhabited by memory. Modern research continues revealing remarkable new information. Airborne laser scanning has identified previously unknown earthworks hidden beneath dense vegetation. Digital reconstruction allows damaged temples to be studied in extraordinary detail. Conservation scientists examine ancient brick compositions to understand how these structures survived more than a millennium in a tropical environment. Every technological advance sharpens the picture, yet none removes the deeper mystery. How much of the ancient capital still lies concealed beneath the forest floor? What ceremonies unfolded inside temples whose roofs collapsed centuries ago? What knowledge disappeared forever when the final generation abandoned the city and allowed the jungle to reclaim its streets? Perhaps the most remarkable quality of Sambor Prei Kuk is that it exists in the shadow of a far more famous successor. Angkor eventually became one of history's greatest urban centers, drawing worldwide attention for its monumental architecture. Yet many of the artistic, religious, and architectural traditions associated with that later civilization were already taking shape here among these quieter temples. In that sense, Sambor Prei Kuk is both origin and mystery. It preserves the foundations of an extraordinary cultural legacy, while withholding many of the details that would explain how that transformation truly occurred. As daylight gradually fades beneath the forest canopy, the brick towers take on deeper shades of red and brown. Long shadows settle across ancient courtyards, while the sounds of the jungle slowly replace the warmth of the afternoon. It becomes easy to imagine how quickly these temples disappeared from ordinary memory once the surrounding vegetation reclaimed the landscape. Yet they never truly vanished. They waited. Hidden beneath branches, roots, and centuries of silence, they preserved fragments of a forgotten capital until archaeology began uncovering them once again. Even now, countless questions remain unanswered. Somewhere beyond the excavated sanctuaries, beneath untouched ground or concealed within another forgotten cluster of temples, Sambor Prei Kuk may still hold discoveries capable of reshaping our understanding of one of Southeast Asia's earliest great civilizations. Until those hidden places are revealed, the forest will continue guarding its ancient secrets, allowing only brief glimpses into a world that refuses to surrender all of its mysteries.